This episode of the MJCast is dedicated to Donald Shackelford Jr., who tragically passed away shortly after the recording of this episode. Donald, brother of our guest today, Shawn Shackelford, was affectionately known to all as Peanut. He was an outstanding basketball player, honorably served his country in the US Army, and was loved by all, especially by his son, parents, and little brother. May Donald's memory live on.
The following is a presentation from the MJCast, the internet's premier podcast on all things Michael Jackson.
I'm a Black American. I am proud of who I am.
Together, we can make a change in the world. I want to see you!
I like to take sounds and put them under the microscope.
There's a driving bass if you become the bass.
Let the music write itself.
I don't sing it if I don't mean it.
Welcome to the MJCast, your source of news, discussion, and interviews on the King of Pop. Hello and welcome to episode 134 of the MJCast. I'm your host, Jamon Bull, and I'm here with two great people. I'm back with co-founder of the MJCast, Q, and a special guest who I'll introduce very shortly. But Q, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hello, I'm back. I'm back on the MJCast due to popular demand, I'm going to say.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited to be here with you again recording. We got a great regular news and discussion episode coming up with a very special discussion with somebody that we've been wanting to talk to for a very, very long time. Shawn Shackelford is here with us. Shawn is a listener who's been with us for many years. I'm going to ask you in a second, Shawn, how long you've been listening for. But welcome to the MJCast. It's great to finally have you on the show.
I'm very excited to be here. And I've been listening for roughly about 3 years. And you guys are good listening when I go to work or when we're on road trips.
Oh. Absolutely. I can agree. I still tune in every time there's an episode for my commute to work.
That's great. That's great. All right. So, Shawn, a couple of the reasons that I'm so happy to be finally talking to you, we've been kind of talking on Twitter over the years about, you know, your love of the Jackson family and the Jacksons as a group, but also, I mean, you and I, we both work in schools. I'm a head of department for history, and you, up until pretty much our recording date today, were a school principal. You've just been given an incredible promotion. So I can't wait to geek out with you a little bit and talk about school.
Absolutely. It's been a crazy year, but you know what? We made it through, and I'm excited about next year.
Yeah, that is great. And you know what? Congratulations. You've just been recently, in the last 24 hours, made the Executive Director of Student Support and Diversity for Port Huron Area School District. So congratulations.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I'm excited to get down to business, and I'm working for a great superintendent and work for a great district. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, now that is awesome. I had to do my research on you this morning because I know from your tweets that you've always been incredibly passionate about students and diversity in schools and inclusion. I read this article that you did this morning with the Keel, where you talk a lot about great things like restorative practices with students and also mentoring and coaching. And I found what was really interesting in this article was how you came when you first got to the school. It was talking about how there was a lot of white teachers in the school, and you came in wanting to really turn around this issue of disproportionate behavior outcomes, I guess, for black students in the school. And I think you said in the interview that there was a feeling among some of the staff that you wanting to change that around. Some of the white staff even felt that was racist towards them, wanting to turn that around a little bit. I just thought that was incredible that you had such a passion for that right there.
Yeah, it was, you know, our school had been flagged for disproportionate referrals and suspension of black students. Superintendent at the time felt it was important that we really address that issue. And the number one thing we did was we came in and we just started talking about implicit bias and what it is and, you know, how it relates to the classroom. And yes, some of the teachers did feel like we were calling them racist. They were taken aback. And what you also have to understand is I'm the only black staff member in the building.
What?
So teachers, secretaries, custodians, but we do have about 20% students of color. And so it was different. And so it was going, obviously when you do that kind of work, it's going to take time. But I will tell you, I had a great team working with me, and we eventually got there. But it was just getting people to understand that in some situations you do treat kids differently. And there's a lot of that has to do with bias. And I had to, share with them some of my own bias as well. And I said, we all come with it, but it's about recognizing it and, and doing something about it. And so I think we did a good job of really reducing the number of suspensions. I created a refocus room where there was an area where kids can go. And if they needed to blow off steam or if teachers needed a break, we would send them there as opposed to writing them up on a referral and then eventually suspending them. So we did those types of things. And then but also because our Black students, in particular, our Black boys were being suspended more, I reached out to some of the Black men in the community and asked them to come in and mentor some of our boys. So we had a group that we were meeting with every Wednesday. We bring them pizza and pop, and the men would just sit and talk with them, and it made a huge difference. So I'm really excited to continue that work, but on the district level for our schools and our students.
That is brilliant, and I can hear that passion in your voice. And
yes. I
tell you what, in iBlock where I work, I think I need a refocus room because there's some lessons I walk out of where I need to blow off some steam as well.
Yes.
But that sounds awesome, and this is why we love at the MJCast every once in a while doing an episode where we shine a light on one of our listeners or some of our listeners who just do incredible things. So the MJ community is so full of amazing people doing great things. So again, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's okay. Another thing I love about your presence online and your social media is the great family-focused posts that you and your wife Jill do. As a dad of one kid, a daughter, I look at your posts and I'm like, wow, this guy is a great dad. I just love you. You've obviously got a very love-filled family and so much support. So I love the stuff you're doing there as well.
Thank you. We try. We have 3 girls. Our oldest is 8 years old, and our twins will be 6 next week. And so they keep us busy. I love my wife. I love my girls, and life is good. I always say that life is good.
That's great. Now, Q, I hope you don't mind, but I got a couple of more little teaching-related questions just to get you back for all the aviation questions you threw at Brad Buxer.
And the train game with Big Al.
Yeah.
I'm loving it. Though I just wanted to say, wow, those lucky kids in your school and your district, Shawn, they're very lucky to have you, and also your daughters. And yes, that would keep you very busy with twins and an 8-year-old. That would keep you super busy.
Yes. And I will also say that, I really love my school community. I'm sad that I'm going to be leaving them. But they all know that I'm a huge Jackson fan. And so I do every once in a while I'll get a Jackson related gift from someone, either on my staff or from one of my parents. So I've been very lucky, very lucky.
Oh, that is sweet. Every once in a while I get that kind of thing as well. We got a school, we got an awards night coming up in a month or two at our school to recognize all the academic achievers from the year. And I've heard, because last term I had the privilege of being a deputy principal for a term, and because I was in charge of the performing arts department for that term, I've heard that they are currently rehearsing a student choral version of Will You Be There to do.
Cool.
Going to be very special.
I love it. I love it. And Jamon, I have to ask you, do you have any desire to go into administration?
Well, I was actually going to bring that up with you because I wanted to know what made you take on that leap of getting into administration, because I feel like, there were some things I loved about being a deputy for the last term, but I don't know, there was just something in me that just keeps drawing me back to the classroom, the kids. I don't know whether it's not being ready or whether my number one main passion is to do with history and students. But I just feel like by the end of my experience doing it, by all accounts, I did a great job, but I just feel like my passion is still there in the classroom with the kids.
Then I would tell you stay there. But I will tell you, for me, I was tapped early. And often I would say by people who would just say, hey, you have that presence. We see it in you. And I resisted it for a long time until I couldn't resist it any longer. And once I made that leap, I really enjoyed it. I was assistant principal for 1 year. Then my superintendent immediately made me a principal at an elementary school. And then from there, I've been a principal at all levels, elementary, middle school, and high school. And so it's one of those things where I stopped resisting, what my calling was. And obviously my calling is to lead. Mm-hmm. And so, and I do understand certain people, because I see it in some people, and I try to, encourage them as well. But they always, some people just tell me they want to stay in the classroom. That's where their passion lies. And so when you have that, I leave it alone. I let people stay where their passions lie, and really, pour into them and help them to continue to be good teachers.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, we need great leaders like yourself in schools who are able to inspire and encourage teachers. So I think there's a place for everybody and what people want to do. I don't know. I'm still in my 30s, so we'll see what the future brings when my kid, when Olivia's a little bit older. And I found the hours to be very, very difficult to manage, with a family and a young kid. Definitely a step up in terms of commitment hour-wise, beyond being a head of department. But yeah, we'll see what the future brings. I got to ask you, Shawn, I've let you know what my teaching area is. I love history, and I want to know, back when you were a teacher in the classroom, what are your main areas?
I taught English.
Cool.
I was a high school English teacher, taught grades 9 through 12, and I was also a middle school English teacher as well. So
that leads me to how much of a place do you think Michael Jackson and the Jackson family and their art should have in the classroom?
See, I was a big proponent of, bringing the arts into the classroom. It's funny, I can't remember. It was a colleague of mine, and I want to say she was teaching Edgar Allan Poe. And I can't remember which text she was teaching, but I said, well, you know what? I think I have a video that you might want to share with the kids. And it was the Ghost short film. And I remember I gave it to her, and she showed it to her first couple of classes, and she came back to me and she said, the kids absolutely loved it. This is great. And so she was able to try to I remember this conversation, that this is over 10 years ago now, but I remember her talking about how she made the connections, as the day went on, after she watched it a few times, she was able to make the connections to whatever she was teaching with Edgar Allan Poe to what was happening in the video.
That is great. I also love weaving in Michael Jackson as much as I can. And in the last portion of our show, when we dig into your fan story, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, Q, we good to move on, or do you want to hear more teacher talk?
No, we're good. I was gonna. No, we're all good. I loved listening to that. That was cool. It's like I was in the classroom.
Nice.
But that was cool. But I was going to ask, what's new with you, Jamon? How's things? It's been a while.
Pretty good. Like, really. I mean, I just kind of summed it up. My whole life has kind of been, how do I put this? But I took on that challenge of being a deputy principal for the last 10 weeks. This is my first week of term 3, but term 2 was that whole new role for me. And I went into it having that kind of feeling. I've always had that feeling of it. Could this be for me? The first 7 weeks of it, I was really loving. And then sort of by the end, it was that old feeling of, man, I miss the classroom, man, I miss my department in history. And that feeling just came back and sort of took over, and I knew the direction that I had to go in from there. Yeah, it's been wild, really. And now I'm just in this really happy phase right now where I'm just loving being back doing what I love and spending time with my family, and yeah, everything's good. Although I will say there's probably a big difference. I'm not really sure, Shawn, what the layout or what it feels like right now where you are in the US with coronavirus and everything like that, but we keep going through periods of lockdown in Australia because the vaccination rates are so low compared to what's going on in America. So Q, you'll know all about it as well. But here it's lockdowns, it's masks, it's the same as it was a year and a half ago. So Shawn, what's it looking like there in Port Huron?
Well, in Michigan, we are pretty much back to normal. Our vaccination rate for the state is at about 62%. And so obviously we were trying to get up to about 75%, but it's pretty much back to normal. I think people wear masks. We wear masks when we're out, but there are people who now choose not to. But I believe California is going back to the mask mandate. And so it's pretty much in the U.S. It's a story of those who are vaccinated and those who are not vaccinated. And, you're seeing the spike in the areas where people are not vaccinated.
Who would have thought?
Exactly.
Now, Q, how have you been? Been a while since you've been on.
Yes, it's been a while, hasn't it? What's new? Well, I've got perm. That's new since last year. Rocking the curls since January.
You sent me a photo the other day of you like stapling things, and I'm like, "What are you doing today?" I'm stapling stuff.
No. The opposite. I'm on light ground duties. One of my tasks, which I stretched out for like 4 weeks, which was great, was removing staples from paperwork. Removing staples from paperwork so it could go into like some shredding bin for a shredding company. So I stretched that out, and then I got given another job, which was removing from these big, thick manuals, like phone book thick manuals, the sort of spiral. It's like a plastic spiral that goes through the side of the manual, and the plastic cover. And they're like, "Oh, can you remove all these covers and these spines so we can then put this paperwork in the shredding bin as well?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure," thinking it was going to take ages. But after doing like 3 of them, I figured out a way of doing it really super quickly, and I can remove the spiral in less than a minute. But then I'm like, oh no, now I've done so many, there's not much to do left. So what other boring job am I going to get given after this? So I've sort of had to slow that down and pretend I don't know how to do it very fast.
Well, I bet you can't wait for things to go back to normal.
It's going to be a while, I think. But I also help board flights. So I get to run over to the airport and help the ground staff board the flights, which I love doing, because I love boarding anyway, and the ground staff love having me there. But I'm that crazy person at 5 a.m. that's like, "Good morning, happy Monday, have a great flight. Oh, you got a window seat, that'll be great for a nap." And like, I'm so hyper and engaged at crazy hours of the early morning when the sun's not up. So they like that positivity, but they look at me and go, "What is this guy on?
What sort of coffee has he had?"
And I haven't even had a coffee at that point. I've only had a cup of tea at my 3 a.m. breakfast. So,
man. So what do you like after you've had a Starbucks? Jesus.
Well, we don't have Starbucks in my state, so sadly. But no, there is plenty of airport cafes. So I get a coffee about probably 8 o'clock in the morning when there's a lull in the departures. Mm-hmm. And then, I don't know, it just maintains. But yeah, I think I'll be on the ground for a couple of months, possibly yet. I've got some sort of joint injection into my shoulder on Tuesday. I had an injection 4 weeks ago, cortisone into the bursa, because we're hoping it was just bursitis.
Yeah.
But it looks like it's capsulitis. So now I need a different injection into the shoulder capsule, hoping that helps, because it's starting to freeze up. So I'm not looking forward to that, because that will be a painful one in comparison to the previous one. But hopefully it helps in the long term. So, yeah, I think we're all caught up now. That's about it.
We're all good. Just
sorry, listeners, we will talk about MJ stuff, I promise.
The longer we do this show, the more old man stuff we start talking about. So today's an update on Q's shoulder injury.
God. It's like when you talk to your parents, it's like, okay, let's go through all your medical appointments for this last week.
Oh, boy. Okay, so another reason that we have Shawn on the show is because Shawn loves the Jacksons, and we love the Jacksons.
Yes.
And so, Shawn, you have told us before that your favorite era of the Jacksons and Michael Jackson is that late 70s to very early 80s. And our first news topic for today is how the Jacksons are really putting an emphasis back on that era as well with their re-releases of their albums from that period. And along with that, they've also put out a couple of videos now for the remixes of Can You Feel It? So we've got 2 videos that have just come out. One of them is called the Kirk Franklin Remix. which is lots of fun, lots of great choreography and vocal collaborations going on there as well. Very, original type of music being woven in. And it really showcases some great talent. And then we also had the Jacksons and Martin Luther King remix come out of Can You Feel It, which is just I love that song in particular, or that remix. And then we'll talk about the video. So Shawn, have you had a chance to first of all get those album reissues, and then have you seen the videos too?
So I have not been. I'm slipping. I was used to be, before I became a dad. I was on top of it. I would get it the first day. Slipping a little bit, so I'll make sure that I'll get those. I'm planning on getting those sometime in the next couple weeks. I have seen the Kirk Franklin one, and I'm kind of leery when it comes to those kind of remixes, because they could be hit or miss. But I absolutely love the Kirk Franklin remix of Can You Feel It? There was just something about, the call and response, angle that he took with that. That's the tradition of the, Black church in America. So the way he weaved that tradition into that song and really, put that emphasis on Michael's verses. There was just something about that one that really, stuck with me. The other one I just seen bits and pieces of. I know there's a clip going around on Twitter where I think Jackie is dancing at the end of it. So I've just seen that little bit of the clip from it. And so I actually I've heard that one, but I've not seen the entire video. And so of the two, I like the Kirk Franklin better. But it's always good to see Jackie, on screen dancing.
Cute.
That's such a point that I'm so glad you raised about the Kirk Franklin one, Shawn, because I watched that yesterday, and it was set like you said, in a church. So it was people dancing in the aisle and the pews of the church, and then choir ladies in their blue gowns dancing as well. And now you've made that connection for me about the Black church tradition, which is so much more exciting than our church over here, I can tell you that, which is one of the reasons I stopped going, because it was so boring. Now that absolutely makes sense. And I read a comment on YouTube, I think it was, of someone that helped choreograph that video, which, let me just bring it up because I screen capped it actually, from Josh Taiwan Williams. And if I can just read a little bit of his comment, because it actually talked about the church aspect. He said on the YouTube comments, I'm honoured to be asked to collaborate. As a dancer choreographer, we don't get a lot of say in the final outcome. For me, this was my hardest job to complete. We had a week or two, but we pulled it off. I'm happy with the outcome. Like I said, I was super nervous to present this in a church. Would have preferred outside, but I did my best not to do anything out of pocket and keep it presentable. It's hard to do that as a dancer, especially to Michael. And I appreciate everyone's feedback, good and bad. So that's so interesting about that church connection. And for me now, that totally makes sense. But it's a beautiful video to watch. It's very classy, very respectful, beautiful dancing and choreography. And the mix of this song is really beautiful. It's a beautiful vocal remix, more than a sort of club or music remix. It's very vocal heavy stylings, and I loved that. And with the other video, the Martin Luther King and also Obama's featured in it as well. It's a very American marching band focused video from the one I saw. Mm-hmm. And also it shows a lot of amazing people from Black history from in the past and currently, people currently like Stacey Abrams, who they feature these people and what their accomplishments and achievements. For the mixes, I prefer the MLK mix because I don't know why, it's so rousing and positive and really pumps me up when I hear it. But I have actually added both of these mixes to my Spotify listening lists because I actually love both of them and it's such a good song anyway, but something a bit fresh about each of them. So yes, I like both videos and I like both mixes a lot.
Can You Feel is such a spiritual song, and yes,
definitely.
interesting because, when I first bought the album and put that song on, it was not my favorite song. And I would always skip over that and go straight to Lovely One. And a little bit later, I'll tell you how it became one of my favorite songs. So watching what Kirk Franklin did with it, just the mix, and then watching the video, it's very appropriate. And so the person who choreographed it shouldn't feel bad about it, or shouldn't, because when Michael danced, Michael was in the spirit. That's what we call, in the African American church, you're dancing. Dancing is okay because you're dancing in the spirit. And it talks a lot about that in the Bible. And so to me, it was absolutely appropriate. So which is why, because when I first saw that, I played it over and over again for at least an hour because it just really captured me and it just stuck with me. And so I just think it's a magnificent remix.
Yeah, that's definitely my pick of them as well. I prefer the Kirk Franklin video. I think I prefer the UQ. I like the remix for the Martin Luther King one, the audio, but the video I prefer the Kirk Franklin one, mainly because I think that the other one, which is sort of their main one, I guess, is a bit of a missed opportunity in some ways. Like the marching band footage is cool, but there's just so much of it, and the stuff that I sort of preferred in it was what you were saying, Q, those little flash moments to the black luminaries who have changed the world in some regard. And they sort of just show that for a second with their name and what their profession was or their job. But there didn't seem to be a lot more further footage of those people doing what they're known for. It's sort of 99% marching band and 1% of the people. And I think if they just flipped that around a little bit and had more footage of MLK or Rosa Parks or whoever they're showing, that would have been great.
Well, can I ask Shawn about the marching band tradition? Because that is, I don't know, but to me it seems like such a unique American institution and entertainment and skill set. And it's, featured very heavily in that video. So can Shawn maybe enlighten me and other people perhaps listening about that, and what is that and what makes it such a big thing and also so cool to watch?
So I think you have, and I apologize, I've not seen that entire video. I think I've seen portions of it, or the marching band. But in America, you have two types of marching bands, I should say. You have your historically black colleges, those marching bands, and then you have your traditional university marching bands. And the historically black colleges, they tend to be more, rhythmic. There's more dancing. There's more, drumline. It's more. It's more rhythmic.
It's definitely that which is featured in this video. Yes. It's definitely that one.
And if I'm not mistaken, Fleetwood Mac, I think for Tusk, I think they used a marching band for that particular song. They used a marching band from a historically black college. I'll have to go back and double check, but I'm almost certain. I just don't know which college they used. So that is the tradition of, marching band. So it's funny when those two colleges, when they play football and you see the two marching bands, it is a stark difference between the two. There's nothing wrong with either one. It's just your preference. And so if you've ever seen the movie Drumline, which I actually just watched a couple hours ago because it was just happened to be on, that gives you an insight into what goes into those marching bands.
Yeah, I love the marching band stuff. I think it's great. I just love the other stuff too, and I just wish they'd put a bit of a highlight on some of the footage of those incredible black people. But listener Jerome Horn, I know, is going to be loving this conversation because he is a big marching band guy. Shawn, have you had a lot to do with Jerome over the years? Have you spoken to Jerome?
No, I have not. I know my wife is a graduate of an HBCU, and so she's taken me to usually have a battle of the bands in the fall. And so it's phenomenal to see in person. It's really fun.
Very cool.
It looks amazing. Very talented, musicians and performers and everything. Yeah. It's, like I said, it's not a thing over here, and I don't know about other countries either. So I was loving it in the video.
All right, next news topic is the Black Music and Entertainment Walk of Fame has inducted Michael Jackson. at first, when I read this headline, I was like, finally, why didn't that happen earlier? But it turns out that these guys only started doing their thing in downtown Atlanta only like a month ago or something like that, or very recently. So they actually haven't had a lot of time to induct people as of yet. Michael is one of the first people to be inducted. He was inducted on the 17th of June, 2021, and you can see his stone on the Walk of Fame at the sidewalks of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive and Northside Drive in Atlanta. And this started, like I said, in January 2021 to honor African Americans with a monument for their achievements in entertainment. And what's cool about this particular event is that when it happened, Marlon Jackson from the Jacksons was actually there in honor of his brother. And so was Karen Langford, I think, representing the Michael Jackson estate. And Marlon, I haven't actually seen the speech, but I've heard that he made a very touching speech about his brother Michael there, which I think is really neat.
I think it was on Twitter, it looked like someone just filming from the audience a bit of Marlon's speech, and they cut it together in like multiple clips, I think, of the speech into a little video. And it was very touching and very nice. And Marlon looked well. Thank you for clarifying that this organisation, really, the Black Music Entertainment Walk of Fame, only started recently, because I was also a little bit confused and I couldn't really find on the website like a history of the organisation itself. So thank you for clarifying for that. So I guess Michael would be one of the inaugural recipients of this honour.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, like you said, it is great to see that Marlon is improving. We know that he had some heart issues just a couple of weeks prior to this event. So it is great to see him happy and out and about and doing his thing.
And looking good with the bald head.
Yeah, he does look good. Very sleek. You know what, Q? Remember back in the day, we spoke to a guy, an author called Christophe Charlot, who wrote the Traveling with a King book?
Of course, yes.
I think he's got to get a new version out with this in there. This has got to be somewhere people are going to go.
Yeah, and Shawn, another place you get to visit in your country to honor Michael. Very cool. Very lucky.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, we've had some changes come about with the MJ the Musical, some cast changes, and they've also recently just released some merch on their website as well that you can go and buy. Admittedly, I haven't had a look at the merch yet, but the cast changes are kind of interesting because, I mean, this show is due to come out. So it's coming out in December. December 6th is the opening night. And the main person in the show, the guy who was performing as Michael Jackson, Ephraim Sykes, is no longer participating in the production. So that was really big news when that happened. And he released a statement saying, "It's with a heavy heart that I depart, MJ. This year has brought a lot of change and opportunity, and although it's bittersweet to say goodbye to an iconic role in production, I look forward to what is to come. Thank you to the MJ team and congratulations to Miles," meaning Miles Frost. "I can't wait to see you shine as the king of pop and for all of us to celebrate the return of Broadway." Now, as Ephraim said in that statement, Miles Frost will take his place and make his Broadway debut in the production. Miles is known for his role in the TV series Family Reunion and in the movie All In. Well, firstly, before I talk about other things to do with the musical, I want to know what you guys think about this. Like, is it at all shocking to you, or what do you think about this being so late in the production?
Well, when it comes to any type of retelling of Michael's life, it's always a concern for me because you never know which direction they're going to go in. And so that's always been my concern about this production. And so, I just hope and pray that this, Miles is, up to the challenge. But my biggest concern, my biggest hope is that this production is quality and it focuses on the correct aspects of Michael's life and career. And so that's kind of, I was kind of shocked to see that so close to showtime. But, obviously we'll wait and see, how it all turns out. But, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that this is a quality production.
I'm not too familiar with sort of the production of Broadway shows. I've seen a number in New York on holidays in years past, but in the production side I'm not too familiar if this is a common thing for cast changes in the 12 months or 6 months or so before the show debuts. So I'm not sure if this is an unusual thing. It's a lot of pressure on Miles Frost coming into a production that was hopefully, close to hitting its stride in the rehearsals and the creation of it. And now he has to come in like at, I guess, a disadvantage because everyone's been working on their parts and the production for so long. And now he's coming in like with 6 months to go or so. So huge pressure on him. I'm sure he's not like just some guy like out of high school or something. He's probably definitely had theatre experience and other things before. So he would have been hired for his talent, and that's a good thing. So I wish him well. I wish the production well, but also I hope that it is a quality production, that it's an accurate production. I know there are some Broadway pundits sort of bagging it out like, why is this even happening after everything of the last few years? And then they cop all of the blowback from MJ fans and stuff when they do speak out and say such things like that. So it'll be interesting when it does open, the reception that this gets. But hopefully it's a quality production and the quality wins out and blows everyone away, and that does great, like the Tina musical on Broadway. So hopefully it'll be just so terrific and amazing that people will flock to it for years to come.
You said before that you hope it's also an accurate production, and the first image that they chose to release of Miles as MJ is him doing a pose that I don't remember Michael Jackson ever doing on stage.
Yeah.
And so is that a thing? Like, does that bother you guys, or do you think in a Broadway production like this, there should be some creative license for people to interpret Michael's style?
I think so. I think there should be some creative license. Like, for example, not related and not super similar, but the Lion King musical. Like, when they were like, oh, we're going to do the Lion King on Broadway, Broadway people were like, are you kidding? Like, why? What on earth would you do the Lion King on stage in Broadway, which is, very held highly esteemed production and playwrights and directors and cast and things like that. The movie at the time, The Lion King, was like the animated film. The Broadway production was completely different. It is like very similar story, but the creative license made it into one of the greatest musicals ever made. They're not exactly the same, though. They're two different things. Although this is a retelling of someone's story and part of their life, it's not going to be visually the same exactly, because it's Broadway. They they can't recreate things, because what we saw was on TV. Live production is not looking the same as if you're sitting watching a TV. It's on a stage. There's different limitations, and in some ways they can do things that they couldn't do on TV. So I think it's always going to be a little bit different. I just have to try and keep faith that it's going to be done amazing and done with love and care.
Shawn.
MJ's dancing style is so unique to him. And so my wish is that they be as accurate as possible with respect to his dance moves. I mean, obviously, and I agree with Q, there's a certain amount of, creative license, they're going to have, and I'm okay with that. But, you gotta hit the classic MJ dance moves. You have to hit the classic, MJ singing style. Those things you can't veer off. You can't veer off. You got to stay true to who Michael was in terms of his actual performance.
All right. So, unfortunately, the estate is still using Lynn Nottage and her book for the story, despite the fact that she's still not really clarified her comments that she made during the Leaving Neverland saga. So I guess we hope as a community collectively that moving forward that production is still respectful. I'm sure it will be, because the estate are so heavily involved in it that like I can't imagine a way that it wouldn't be celebratory. But regardless, the tickets are on sale right now. It's due to launch on December 6th still. The tickets start at $99. They go all the way up to $599. And if you go to I went to the website to have a look at, like what's available still for the opening night. And I would say that a third of the tickets are still available for that opening night. But Q, as you were saying to me before we started recording, that's not unusual at the moment for Broadway with COVID.
I think, there is a friend of mine I follow on Twitter in New York, and he is a huge theatre fan and has seen literally hundreds of shows on and off Broadway. And a couple of weeks back, they were talking about which shows are coming back, which shows are sadly not coming back when Broadway reopens, and ticket sales. And this is launching in December, which is still quite a way away. And from what I was reading on tweets that he was talking about, that ticket sales for a lot of shows, are not the same as what they used to be at the moment because of the hit to the industry and tourism as well. Because there's probably no international tourists coming to New York at this point. So I wouldn't take stock too much in ticket sale figures yet. Closer to the date, that will be the main thing.
Right. Thank you for summing that up, Q, about the ticket sales. I think that's important to remember. I'm less originally I was a little bit hesitant around this. I guess I still am a little bit, but I just think it's going to be a good thing in the end. Like we're coming out of COVID in America right now. There's it's a period now where people want to get out and celebrate and enjoy things, and I think it's actually really good timing that this is going to be there for audiences to go and see as they start to flock to theaters again.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you also, Jamie, because I was a little hesitant as well, but I'm definitely going to put this on my to-do list and give it a shot, and I think it'll be great.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of events coming back, MJ1 in Las Vegas returns on August 19th, just so listeners are aware if they want to go see that again. There's actually, I haven't really dug into this too much. I haven't researched it, but I think there was an announcement a few days ago about a special event paired with that for Michael's birthday that the estate are putting on. I think they normally put on an event connected to MJ1, so that I think there will be something like that happening again this year. And Brad Sundberg, Michael's studio engineer and technical director, has also started doing his in-person in the studio events again for the first time since coronavirus broke out. Shawn, do you know of any Michael Jackson related events happening in your part of the world?
Not at the moment, but I will say right before the pandemic started, I had reached out to Brad Sundberg to, have him bring his seminars to the Detroit area. And so we were working. I was actually told him I would do the groundwork and try to go out to different venues and try to set it up. And we couldn't quite get it off the ground because it happened. We were trying to get it together right after leaving Neverland. So we didn't get the response that we wanted, but we started to get some momentum. And I think he actually was able to reach out to a venue, but then the pandemic hit. So I'm actually going to reach back out to Brad and try to get him to come back to Detroit.
Awesome.
So I'm going to present a news story now related to Neverland Ranch. The new owner, Ron Burkle, has discussed in very general sort of terms his plans for Neverland. In a recent and rare interview for the Wall Street Journal, Ron Burkle has finally spoken about his latest purchase, Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch. Burkle also owned and restored and sold the Frank Lloyd Wright Ennis House in Los Feliz, where 3T and Michael filmed the Y video. Thought that was quite an interesting little sidebar. Burkle and Michael Jackson, Neverland's second owner, had a history. Mr. Burkle said that he had visited the ranch in the mid-2000s as part of a program for disadvantaged children and hit it off with Mr. Jackson. He said that the pop star called him the next day to say that he liked him and that from now on he would buy all his groceries at Mr. Burkle's stores. Shawn, do you know what chain of grocery stores Ron Burkle owns? Because I didn't know about that.
I don't know. I'm going to quickly Google that.
All right. You do that and let us know, because I thought that was funny. I don't think it was Michael doing all the grocery shopping, but anyway.
Somehow.
Mr. Burkle served as an advisor to the singer on business matters, and that was during the time Michael was working to stave off financial disaster, which was a lot of the time in the later years. Ongoing construction at Neverland Ranch has fed speculation about whether Burkle may be interested in turning Neverland into a Soho house, but he said that isn't the case. So I don't know what Soho house is, Jamon. Do you?
No. I don't know what even the word Soho means. I'm going to Google it now as well.
I'll have all my assistants Googling things while I do the talking. He said his team is working on restoring parts of the ranch that were falling apart from neglect, such as replacing pipes and drainage, and the train station, which of course was modelled after the Main Street train station at Disneyland, had been damaged by woodpeckers, and that is also being restored, as well as the Neverland Flower Clock, which is iconic. Many of the roads around the ranch have also been upgraded, and Mr. Burkle has said he hopes that one day one of the trains may run again. In the words of Mr. Burkle, again, it was kind of a depressing place. It wasn't the beautiful place that it was before. It just needed flowers and life in it again. So good things for Neverland. Good things for Neverland, I think. Restoring it, repairing it at this stage, not demolishing it. We know that he bought this as more of a financial purchase, because if you invest in property and land, generally the prices go up because there's a limited amount of it. So it's not like a big Michael Jackson fan has bought this and restoring it and all that. It's restoring it and protecting it while he is the owner, but he may sell it down the track in the future if it's a good investment to do such a thing. But I think at the moment it's in good hands, and we should be happy about this.
I'm definitely happy that someone is coming in and attempting to restore it the way that it should be. I visited Neverland. I got as far as the gate, and I was in awe just in terms of the size of it. And I'm happy and I'm hopeful that it will be, at some point open to fans in some way, shape, or form for us to enjoy it. But, we'll see.
Yeah, totally agree. Even if it is just like a yearly thing where they, like a group of fans get to go in that are participating in the annual celebration that they do for MJ1. You'd have to hope that at some point, if it's not, obviously because of the zoning restrictions, they won't be able to do a day-to-day, you turn up, there's a car park, you go in. That's never going to be a thing. But if they could somehow weave it in with like an annual Michael Jackson celebration, that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, like a charity event. Something like that would be incredible and amazing.
Absolutely. I think the fans are craving it, and I think, it'd be a great idea. And I looked it up, and Ron Burkle used to own Whole Foods and A&P, and I think he owns now Fred Meyer's, Rouse, and Jurgensen's.
Whoa.
We don't have in Michigan, so I'm only familiar with Whole Foods and A&P.
Yeah, there's some big brand names, big chains. And how did you go with your research of what Soho House is, Jamon?
It's actually really complicated, and I'm not even going to attempt to explain it. But
okay.
Yeah, it looks. There's lots of places around the world that can be referred to as a Soho location. And lots of cities have them, but I've found at least 2 or 3 different historical explanations for what it is.
So who knows?
Who knows?
I actually think it was a couple of weeks ago I shared a video that when I saw Neverland, which was I think 2007, saw it from the gates and also from the perimeter from a light aircraft. I actually shared, I think it was in my Instagram stories, so I might have to share it again, the video that took from the plane and crappy digital cameras that we had back then, which were nowhere near as good as what our phones are now, which is hilarious. But yeah, it was an amazing place. And I was lucky to see it when the rides were still there. So Michael wasn't living there at the time. The animals had left the zoo, as far as I know, but the rides were actually still in place. And you can see some of that. So just remind me, Jamon, and I'll share that again.
Sounds good.
All right, moving on to the next news story, which was such a good one. The artist, the singer, the rapper, the entertainer, Lil Nas X, paid homage to Michael in a recent performance. It was the BET Awards, which is the Black Entertainment Awards. That was, when was it? Sunday, 27th of June, I believe. And many were calling it the best performance of the night. Lil Nas X performed at the Los Angeles Microsoft Theater his single Montero, Call Me By Your Name, a song that he released a few months ago to a huge hullabaloo, which was fantastic and so deserved. You've been telling us to do that for ages, and he went and did it, and it was great video. Anyway, in the performance at the BET Awards, Lil Nas X incorporated the ancient Egyptian-inspired costumes and inspired by MJ's legendary Remember the Time short film. He, along with a group of background dancers, also performed parts of the choreography routine that Michael did in that epic video and played parts of the song during that choreography part in one point of his performance. The beginning of the performance is just like Remember the Time started when Michael entered in a black robe, and Lil Nas X ended the performance with a steamy kiss he shared with one of his dancers, just like Michael did with Iman in the video, which I actually didn't even think of at the time. I think I was just so excited that he kissed one of his dancers that I didn't even make the connection. Hang on a minute, Michael did the exact same thing in the video.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I was like, duh. Yeah. So obvious now. Firstly, James, can I just say a lot of your news stories from MJ Vibe, is that correct?
Well, the notes that so MJ Vibe has become sort of like one of the main places where we get the news stories from because Pez and the team are so good at keeping everything up to date. But a lot of our notes that we're reading from are snippets from the news stories. So if they sound similar to the MJ Vibe, that's why.
Well, I wanted to give credit to MJ Vibe and to the staff over there and the writers, because when I was researching all of the stories, and many of them had linked back to MJ Vibe, the writing of their stories was really good. And this one also impressed me greatly. So to the writers over MJ Vibe, well done on your recent stories and your recent writing, and thank you for keeping us all up to date with the news. And Jamon, you'll probably share their details later in the episode, but hats off to the writers. But what a great story, what a great performance. I am very curious about both of your opinions on this performance and the MJ tribute especially, but I loved it. And I was so proud of Lil Nas X, and I thought it was not only an amazing tribute to MJ and to the Remember the Time video film, but it was an amazing, groundbreaking performance, and I just loved it, and it's about time. And yes, before I continue on, who's next? Who's going to share their opinion on this?
Shawn?
I will say that, I always love it when performers pay tribute to Michael Jackson. We went through a time where, people were distancing themselves from Michael. And so you're seeing more and more performers who are, paying tribute to him, wearing T-shirts out in public, name checking him in songs. It is phenomenal. I'm not a huge Lil Nas X fan, but I appreciate him, being as creative as he was, to include the Remember the Time choreography, which is probably definitely in my top three of all the Michael Jackson videos. And so it was just great to see.
Yeah, I thought it was excellent. The choreography wasn't like a tribute start to finish where it's like, oh, they're doing the Remember the Time choreography. I felt like the fact that it was subtly woven in amongst other choreography actually made it more exciting when they got into the dance break, because then you start to, as an MJ fan, you start to realize like, oh, that's the bit that's MJ and that's not, and that isn't. It was really clever and really subtle as well. And the production value was amazing. The costumes were absolutely incredible. I think that the costuming was even better than the Michael Jackson video. Maybe that's sacrilege to say as MJ
No,
fan.
I was thinking they were incredible costumes. Yeah. They were amazing.
Absolutely brilliant. But the moment where the kiss happened was so important to me and so good, because it was really just shining a light on the fact that, you know, love is love. And it was great that statement was made in such a public forum. And it reminded me of the moment where, was it Madonna and Britney Spears kissed, that famous moment at the MTV Awards where they did? So it was kind of like a little bit of a throwback to that in a way. But like, I know the reaction to it has been very, in some cases, ridiculous. And Q, I'm interested to hear what you told me before the show, that you'd had an interesting interaction with somebody online. But I thought it was just such an important statement to make, a timely statement to make, and one that that was very important.
Well, before I share my thoughts, like, Shawn, did you want to mention anything regarding the end of the performance?
It was, like you said, it reminded me of the Madonna Britney Spears moment. And so it was, I almost think it was a tribute to that as well. And so I've seen the reaction, and it was to be expected. And I think that's part of, that's part of his appeal. He has that shock value. And so it was to be expected, and he got what he wanted. And but overall, it was a great performance. I have no issue with it, but I understand. I certainly understand why people are upset with it. But they have to understand he's a performer. He got the reaction that he wanted to get.
Was the Madonna, Britney, and was it Christina Aguilera? It was 3 ladies kissing. Was that also the BET Awards?
No, that was the Video Music Awards.
MTV, oh, the VMAs.
Yeah, I think it was the MTV Awards, I think.
Right. Okay, wow. So I think to be a part of the BET Awards, that was a huge thing for him to do this for that platform and for that audience.
Absolutely. And so it just kind of shows how far we've come as a culture. And obviously we still have a ways to go. But kudos to him for being courageous enough to, do the Michael Jackson, weave in, as Jamon said, weave in the MJ, tribute, but then also being courageous enough to with the kiss at the end.
Absolutely, for sure. Hugely courageous, because really one of the only other times that a male performer has kissed another male on stage was back in 2009 with Adam Lambert, kissed a backup dancer at the end of his performance, and the reaction to that, and that was also after the Madonna and Britney kiss, the reaction to that was so swift and almost career ending. And that was 2009, I'm pretty sure. And here we are in 2021. It took, I think, a huge hit to Adam Lambert when he did it. And even when he was on TV news shows, they would blur that out when they were asking him about it. But then they would show not blurred out the Madonna kiss with Britney. It was so hypocritical and ridiculous. But yes, there has been some negative reaction, which, you know what, there is a minority of people that they are loud, and that will always happen. But like you said, Shawn, I think it does show how much progress there has been. And he was courageous on the 2 fronts of, one, giving his tribute to Michael, because there are plenty of artists that are still afraid to do that. So that was courageous that he could do that. And then also just kiss a dancer, which is really not a big thing, but some people make it into a big thing. I was interested in the reaction of a former guest of ours, Michael Trapson, who I do like his work, and his Traps and EO film is when we had him on to talk about that project, which was amazing. But he did this really long video about how has Lil Nas X gone too far, and it was very ignorant and ill-informed, and I was really disappointed in his reaction to it, because he would be in one breath like, I ain't no homophobe, but then in the next breath, it ain't natural. And I just think he was not qualified to speak on the topic of this at all, because he was very much conflating two issues which are two completely unrelated and not the same thing at all. He was conflating homosexuality with the heinous allegations that Michael was accused of, which is pedophilia. They are not related, not the same, and hugely damaging, and decades of like LGBTQIA plus discrimination and abuse has literally stemmed from that same tarnishing with the same brush, like really actually back to the Bible, because the translation, has come out recently that translation was sort of taken the wrong way, and it was more about condemning pedophiles and that sort of behavior than same-sex love and marriage and that kind of thing. So even all the way back to the Bible and that bad translation. But I think the reaction of Trapson was disappointing, separate to his work and his productions and everything like that. I still like Trapson EO and what he does as a performer, but I was disappointed in his sort of ill-informed opinion on it and position, mixing way too many things that are not related and talking about an agenda. I'm like, well, if you have a problem because of the children watching this, well, that's probably more a problem. Should your kids be watching these award shows and listening to this music in the first place? That would be more a parenting thing, not a performer thing. Yeah. So, and this is just like an equality thing. It's like, well, men and ladies have been kissing on stage forever. So, it's about time that we've had some representation, and this is a good thing for the kids, because there are plenty of gay kids out there that have never seen this on TV, never seen this on stage, never seen this in the video, and they always grow up, because when they don't see it, they're the ones that are shamed into feeling the way they do negative things. So to actually have this representation, and I think also as a black artist and to a black audience, that is a massive, massive positive thing.
Absolutely. And I have to take a step back and put my educator hat on, because obviously, and Jamon, you probably see the same thing. We deal with kids who, they have, issues at home, they bring them to school because, people are not accepting of who they are. And so I always look at it as, and Q, you're right, it's a parenting thing, but it's a teachable moment. It's a moment where you are allowing your kids to watch that, to have those conversations with them. And so it's a huge leap in the Black community and on the BET Awards. And obviously, like I said before, you're going to have those differing opinions. And it's just important that we just have those conversations and not, as you stated before, not, try to twist it and turn it into something else, have the meaningful conversation, because ultimately it will not only help you, but it'll help others as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Trapson or whoever it was saying that it's attention seeking, that concerns me, because Lil Nas X is a gay man. So he's just being as genuine as, he's just being himself on stage. You know what I mean? Like, maybe if it was a straight guy, I don't know, like doing it for shock value, maybe. But this is, to me, he's being an authentic, genuine performer here on stage. So I don't understand that point of view at all, that somebody would say he's just doing it for ratings.
The Madonna stunt, but that was for attention.
Well, aren't all entertainers attention seekers?
Yes, that's why we watch them.
That's true. That's a good point as well.
Literally why we watch them. So true, so true.
Yeah. Well, it has got people talking, this performance, and it is a great one. I loved it. And yes, if you haven't seen it, go watch it, because, we Michael Jackson fans, have been through hell for the past few years since leaving Neverland. So it's incredible to see his choreography being shown on stage again in such a public way, especially at the BET Awards. So incredible. So go watch it and join in the conversation. You can talk about any of the topics we're discussing on the MJCast on Twitter by using the hashtag the MJCast134, which is the current episode, and join in that chat. All right. So Prince Jackson, Michael Jackson's son, has officially joined the MJ estate. There's a quote here released as a statement, I believe, and it says, "The managers believe it would be in the best interest of the estate and the MJJ business for Michael Jackson's son, Prince, to be employed by the estate and or one of its entities as a consultant on certain designated projects. Therefore, petitioners seek this court's order authorizing them to employ Prince as a consultant on such terms and for such purposes as shall be agreed upon by the managers and Prince." Actually, that must be a statement from some kind of court document or something. But regardless, Michael Jackson's son, Prince, is now very much officially involved with the estate on certain projects, which I think is a great thing because forever we've been sort of clamoring for Michael's family to have more involvement with the estate. So hopefully in projects moving forward, they are even more respectful and authentic now that Michael's children have a voice in them.
And Prince, if you're listening, I think the fan community would absolutely love the Triumph Tour to be released. Okay, I'm just going to put that out in the universe.
Yes, please.
I think it would actually make a good feature film. I'm just going to put that out there, Prince.
I back that up. Absolutely.
Yeah, they teased us in Michael Jackson's journey from Motown to Off the Wall, the Spike Lee doco. They teased us with that footage. We need the whole concert. Come on.
Absolutely. I go back and I play that Randy footage over and over and over again. So please, Prince, please.
So I think this is a good thing, but I think we need to remember that there's also other family members that are basically in this same role already. I'm pretty sure Jackie, and possibly Marlon. I might be wrong on that, but definitely Jackie is in that position already. So, we have had some sort of family connection, and it is just a consultant. So they would choose who and when and where they use these consultants. So I don't think it's he's not on the board of directors or anything. I don't know how much say he would have. I don't know if it's a symbolic gesture on Branca's behalf. I think it's a positive thing. Hopefully it's just a first step, maybe more involvement in the future.
And I think this is something that Michael wanted anyway. Yeah. And so, it's just honoring his wishes. So with that, that's another reason why I'm extremely pleased about it. And I'm just excited to see, what he brings to the table.
Yes. Hopefully they listen to him.
Yeah, I could see his involvement being particularly useful if they are going ahead and doing projects like musicals or even the biopic that they've now officially said that they are doing. Prince's detail and information around growing up with Michael, I think, would be particularly useful there. Maybe his input wouldn't be as valuable in terms of the musical authenticity like maybe a studio engineer or producer would be, but certainly in the broader picture of Michael's life and as a father, it would be very, very relevant. I
also think in the charity aspect, we know how heavily Prince is definitely focused on the charity side of Michael's humanitarian inspiration. So I'm hoping that it also definitely reaches out and focuses more on that. And I hope he brings some of that to the table and that they look at that and maybe refocus on that as well.
I agree. Can I just say, Jamon, I'm kind of leery on the biopic. I'm not sure if you guys have discussed this in depth. And I'm just going to leave it there. I'm always reminded of the Flex, biopic, and I'm just like, I just hope it doesn't go down that road.
Well, what do you think? Let me put it to you in a different way, because I'm also extremely wary. And look, I see the benefit that a good one can do for somebody's popularity. Like, just look at Bohemian Rhapsody and Queen, and that thing was massive, and the Ray Charles one and the Johnny Cash one, and But then there's been some terrible ones, like the James Brown one went nowhere. So sometimes they can be great. And if they are great, they can create this amazing swell amongst people that haven't experienced the artist before, celebrating them. But there is so much potential for this to go wrong. And I see its place, as I've said before, as a massive, big Michael Jackson fan. I just love authentic Michael Jackson stuff. So the whole thing probably won't be for me in the end anyway, because I just want to see real Michael. But what is it about it for you, Shawn, that makes you hesitant? Where do you think it could go wrong?
Just in how they decide to tell the story. Now, if you go back to the Jacksons miniseries, I actually thought they did a phenomenal job. Although, again, they skipped my favorite era of the Jacksons. They went from Dancing Machine to Human Nature, with the commercial break in between. And so I think they did a great job of that. But I think what I feel will end up happening is they will focus more on Michael after Thriller. And, there's so many layers to, his life after Thriller. And so people tend to focus on like the James Brown biopic, which I loved. Chadwick Boseman in that role. I didn't like the story because there was so much more to James Brown. I would have loved to see James Brown as a businessman, just like in the Ray Charles movie. You got to see, who he was as a businessman, who he was as a musician, who he was as a husband, as a father, with all of his warts, warts and all, I should say. And so, you didn't, I think it was too much of a focus on the negative in the James Brown biopic. And I think that may end up happening with Michael. They may tend to focus on the salacious tabloid type material as opposed to really digging into who he was as a person, as an artist, and as a man.
Yeah. You put that really well. Q, do you want to add your thoughts? I don't think you've spoken about the biopic much.
No, it was, I think, something you touched on an earlier episode in the year when I think Branca mentioned it in projects. I haven't got a lot to say. I think I agree with pretty much everything that Shawn just said. I think dream casting, Rome Flynn, an African-American actor and singer, he was in probably his biggest role was How to Get Away with Murder, the series with Viola Davis. He was in that, I think, dream casting. Like, he's got the jawline, he's got the cheekbones, he's a handsome man, he's like a good actor, he's like, also a singer, so maybe he could like learn to do some of the singing, although it'd be better if they just used Michael's vocals for it. But all I've got to say, that would be my dream casting.
Yeah, just looking at pictures now, I think you're spot on there.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I mean, that would be for like later Michael, if they were doing something from maybe late Thriller Bad era onwards. I think, if it was that kind of era that they were going to focus on, dream casting would be Rome Flynn.
All right. So we're getting towards the end of our news items shortly. Michael Jackson has been certified as the biggest selling solo artist of all time, as announced very recently by MJ Chart Data. Chartmasters has updated sales from streaming, and Michael Jackson is now officially the biggest selling solo artist of all time. There is still somebody or a group above Michael Jackson in terms of just overall artists. The Beatles still has the number one spot for total units. But Elvis Presley was the top of that list, and now Michael Jackson is officially the biggest selling solo artist of all time. Now he's just got to keep going and get to that number one spot overall. But yes, we do now have confirmation that Michael has taken the throne as the biggest selling solo artist, which is great to see. I won't go over all the total unit numbers, physical and digital sales, but we are talking in, like up to 80 million, the figure like that. So for each physical and digital single sales. So we're talking huge stats here. So one thing I noticed, though, that looking at this list is I don't even know about its accuracy because it just doesn't feel right to me. Like all 10 of those spots that I see on the website have, like what we would consider, I guess, white artists, really. I mean, with the exception of maybe Queen, because Freddie Mercury was a person of color, but
yeah, Michael is the only one, really. Number 2 spot, and everyone else is like a white rock band white solo artist. That's it.
Yeah.
I would love to see where Whitney Houston and Janet Jackson.
Yeah.
I would love to see where they fit in, and even Prince.
Mariah
Carey, yes.
Yeah. So I don't know, like we can celebrate this, which is great, but then I'm not even sure about the accuracy of it overall, because I don't know anybody in my actual life that goes out and listens to Elvis Presley a whole lot. So how he got like the total number one spot, like I know there is an older demographic that would for sure, but how he in 2021 was recently the number one selling solo artist, like that, I don't know.
This list is very heavy on the legacy artists. So
yeah.
Led Zeppelin, Elton John, Rolling Stones, Queen, Elvis, Beatles, MJ, Madonna. I would consider her like a legacy artist now. Yeah, U2, I guess, would be one of the most sort of, well, I suppose they're around the same era as MJ and Madonna. But yeah, it's a very legacy sort of artist heavy list. So I guess in that regard, they've got time up their sleeve, that they've had time to rack up these insanely huge numbers.
Yeah, because it is blending in physical sales with streaming sales.
Yes.
So if it would be a very different chart if you were just looking at streaming. I don't think Michael would even be in the top 20 probably, but yeah, because it's their own physical sale legacy built into it as well, I can kind of say that.
Yeah.
So I guess my question too, under other LP sales, does that include, it probably doesn't, but does that include Jackson 5 material, the Jackson's material? Is it just purely, actually, does it include his Motown solo material?
Yeah, I don't know.
I reckon it would include the Motown solo stuff, but I don't think it would include the Jacksons and J5 stuff.
Okay.
That's my impression from this sort of list.
Which is problematic in general, isn't it? Because that's such an important part of his legacy.
Exactly. And that's where, when people talk about it, they try to separate. I don't separate it. His first single was in 1969. And that's where I usually start. I don't typically separate, out the Jackson 5 and the Jackson material. It's all one and the same for me.
Yeah.
And that goes for people the reverse. Like, so if you have, like if we were discussing John Lennon's legacy, we would take into account the Beatles. You know what I mean? Like you just would, right, because he was, such an important songwriter in that group. It's the same for Michael Jackson. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up the news stories with a few, like the old days, Jamon, a few Jackson family news stories. We'll go through these quickly, but they're very good news and very exciting. Tito Jackson has dropped a new single. It is called Love One Another. The album that is coming off is going to be called Under Your Spell. So the single is out now. The album will be released August 6th. And it is like a bit of a dream come true. I think we spoke to Tito about this, Jamon, and then I think we even spoke to Tarrell and TJ about the same thing, saying, get your dad to do like an acousticy, bluesy sort of album. I think that our wishes come true because this song fits the bill and it is really good. This is like really bluesy, really just, it's not like a pop produced sort of song. It's definitely more instrumental, acoustic sort of sound, and it suits Tito and his voice just perfectly. It's a really good song. I love it, and I look forward to the album.
Yeah.
Any comments, guys?
Just love it. It's really good. It is pretty polished, I would say still. Like I could go with even more raw, but we'll see what's on the album. It's got Stevie Wonder on harmonica and really, really great song. And I've been spinning it a lot lately, and Tito is a very underrated artist in general, actually. Hugely underrated. Yeah, and I hope one day I get to see him live. Like I've seen him perform as a part of the Jacksons, but I know Elise has seen him do a solo gig, and she said it's incredible, and so has Charlie Thompson. So I hope I get to see him live as well.
Well, and I absolutely love it as well. I'm a big Tito fan. I actually saw Tito live back in 2006, and I I brought along my Destiny album, and I was kind of hoping I would just be a groupie and hang out. And he came right on out after the show, and he greeted fans, and he signed my Destiny album.
Yes.
And so, he is the only family member that I've met. I got close to Michael once, but Tito was absolutely a lovely guy, and he chatted with me for a little bit, and I took a picture with him. And so and I agree with you, he is underrated. There's a clip on YouTube of him doing a solo, I think it was the 1975 Mexico tour. It was a bluesy kind of, solo. And I've posted it a couple times on my Facebook and on Twitter. And I just absolutely, I wanted, I felt like it was always a missed opportunity that he didn't, that Joe or the company did not, pursue that angle with him earlier, because the solo was raw, and you could tell he had it was there. It was there for the taking. And I'm just so disappointed that it took so long for him to do a solo album. So whatever he puts out, I'm supporting.
Yeah. And we actually asked him about that, Shawn. I think when Q and I spoke to him, we went with a line of questioning that was like, finally you're getting your solo stuff down. That is awesome. But why now? Like, why not earlier? And his response, I think, was along the lines of, well, because his, kid's mother tragically was murdered. Like, he had to put a lot of his energies into being a dad. And his story is really interesting, and one that I think has a lot of tragedy in it, but a lot of triumph now that he's finally being able to come out and get this solo music out. Yeah, I'm just really happy for him, and I can't wait to get the whole album.
Same here.
Next up, Michael's daughter, Paris Jackson, will appear on 2 episodes of American Horror Stories. It's a spin-off of American Horror Story. The creators, Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk, have built a 16-episode series that will premiere weekly on Hulu, covering a different horror tale with each episode. The first 2 episodes of the series dropped in early hours of July 15, and Paris has joined the growing cast list. Paris plays Maya in the American Horror Stories, appearing in the first 2 episodes of the series. They are titled Rubber Woman, Part 1 and Part 2. Episode 1 welcomes House Flippers Michael, played by the incredible actor Matt Bomer, and Troy, Gavin Creel, along with their daughter Scarlett, played by Sierra McCormack, to the LA murder house from season 1 of American Horror Story. Maya is Scarlett's classmate and potential love interest who ventures into the haunted house to explore it with Scarlett. I won't be watching this because I am way too scared of horror stuff. The limit of my scary movie watching is the occasional slasher pick, like the new Fear Street series on Netflix, the Babysitter films, the Scream series of films, and like maybe I would push it to the newer Halloween films because I've seen the older ones, but not scary horror stuff. I won't be watching this, but I think it's awesome that Paris has been cast in this role.
I'm a huge horror fan, so I'm going to put this on my watch list, and I'm happy for Paris. Obviously we want the best for Michael's kids, and, it seems like she's happy now. And so I'm going to be watching.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to check this one out. I love horror movies and shows as well, big time. In fact, I was watching a great Australian horror movie, Wolf Creek, last night. So I can't wait to check this one out. And we know that Michael had an absolute love of film, and one of his dreams was to get into filmmaking. So I can only imagine how happy and proud he would be right now if he was here of his daughter becoming an actress and having success in that way. I can see him watching it with popcorn and and just loving it. So,
you boys are so brave. You'll have to fill me in on how it goes for Paris in those episodes. Probably not going to end well for her. A lot of people die in these things. Yeah, hopefully she survives or has a spectacular death scene.
Yeah.
Oh dear. And I think wrapping up the news, John Cameron's latest episode on his podcast series, JC's Musicology. So the latest episode is Janet Jackson, 1996 to 1998. And it is the Velvet Rope era, one of Janet's best albums eras and tours, which sadly I didn't get to see that tour, but I saw pretty much either side of it. It's an amazing episode. And again, like all of John Cameron's podcast episodes, not to be missed. Jamon, I'm sure you're a huge fan of this episode as well.
Massively. It's I think his best one, to be honest. It's really technically spectacular. It's building in that music from the multi-tracks, but layering it with interviews with Janet and collaborators, breaking down in just crazy detail the mechanics of the song and how they were building it. It's got demos in there, demo vocals. It's just, if you want a masterclass, if you want an incredible documentary exploring this album, you've got to get it. It's an album that's like more personal and raw than I think any other Janet Jackson album. She really put herself there on the line for people to see. And it's probably got my favorite Janet Jackson song on it, or a candidate for my favorite song, at least after the Control and Rhythm Nation eras, and that's Got Till It's Gone. And for me, the section of the episode that explores Got Till It's Gone is just the highlight. It's, it has got Jimmy Jam explaining how he composed all the instrumental aspects, who he was inspired by. Then it has, he's talking about how Janet was doing early vocals and what the lyrics were about until she changed it up to be what it became. And it's got interviews with collaborators like Q-Tip, and it's just brilliant. I love how he brings in the voices of the collaborators, because I think with Janet and Michael, often what gets lost is the creative, artistic stories of the people doing the music. Because they were people, they had a lot of great ideas on their own, but they were people that brought in others to show their own talents. And to hear from them in these documentaries is just brilliant. It's 1 hour and 20 minutes long, and that's exactly how long I think John Cameron's things should be. Some of his earlier episodes have been shorter, and I think the History era one was quite a bit shorter than that from memory. And my only criticism of John Cameron stuff is that I want it to be way longer, because I just can't get enough of it. So this is exactly, where I think it should be, that kind of 1+ hour level of material. And it's excellent. So if you haven't heard it, go and listen to it. Shawn, do you have any comments on that?
It's funny you say that, Velvet Rope is my favorite album, and it has my favorite song, not necessarily her best, but my personal favorite song, and that's You. I absolutely love that song. And it's one of those songs, when I get on it, I can play it for like an hour straight. It's just hard. It's just, you're right. She puts herself right out there. You're wondering, who is she actually talking about in that song? And so it's just, I was never expecting when I bought that album that, it took a while for me to really appreciate it. But once I did, it quickly became my number one Janet album. So I'm looking forward to listening to that one and really, understanding, what went into the making of that album.
Have you had a chance to see Janet live?
I've seen her live. I've seen her. It would have been the Rhythm Nation tour. I actually had second row seats. Wow. So I got to see Janet up close and personal.
Wow.
Yes. And that was the show. She started the show with the video for All Right. She showed that on the screen before. And it was a phenomenal show. The Jacksons, period, put on a good show, from the brothers to Michael to Janet. It was just, I was blown away.
Yeah. Q, did you get a chance to hear the episode yet?
Oh, yeah. I heard that way back when because it was a little while ago that this episode dropped. I heard it probably that same week. Whenever it's like a Jackson's Family podcast episode release, that bumps up to the top of my podcast queue for my commute to and from work. So yeah, when you were like, John Cameron's new episode, I was like, what? He's got a new episode? When? And then I was like, oh, hang on. No, I already heard this when this came out. And yeah, Velvet Rope, a masterpiece of an album. For me, even, the song Free Zone, that was a huge thing for me to hear an artist singing about equality and like same-sex attraction and stuff like that. That was a huge reaffirming moment for me, which I was really appreciative of. But the album itself is spectacular, and this podcast episode really lifts that curtain and takes you basically into the studio and the creation of it. And well done, JC. And I know, Jamon, that John is a huge inspiration for your podcasts and what you produce and what you guys put out still. He does set the standard. So
he's great.
Does amazing work, and he's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, really great guy. Okay, that covers all the news for episode 134 of the MJCast, and we are now going to dig into the main discussion topic, which is all about Shawn Shackelford's fan story. We love having listeners on the show sometimes to talk about, their whole story. And Shawn's story is a really, really interesting one to me because he is somebody that really has been a fan for a long time. And a lot of the fans I talk to may have only become a fan during Michael Jackson's solo years or even later. I mean, I became a fan during the Invincible era. You became a fan during the Dangerous era. And there's a lot of listeners who became fans after Michael passed away. And Shawn, you've been a fan a lot longer than that, and even had the privilege of seeing the Jacksons live during their prime in the tour that I think, in my personal opinion, was the highlight of their careers, which was the Triumph Tour. Very excited, Shawn, to talk to you about your fan story. So, Shawn, take Q and I back in time to those early memories of the Jacksons.
So I will admit I'm 49 years old, and so I've been a fan as long as I can remember. So that's taking me back to about 1975, 1976. I know we had the Looking Through the Windows album, we had the Get It Together album, and I know I played the Looking Through the Windows album nonstop. And we had a little guitar, and so I have an older brother. I would make him be Jermaine, and I would be Michael. And it was just I've never known a time where Michael was not in my life and I was not a fan. You didn't get the opportunity to see them on TV often. So when they were on TV, it was must see TV. It was, I was right there in front of the TV. And so I have, like I said, I've been a fan for a long time. And when I was, able to start asking my parents for money to buy their records, I would always get their records. I was really in the Gamble and Huff years with Enjoy Yourself and, those albums that I really just, I became a mega fan. And so, yes, I did see the Triumph Tour, but there is a little backstory to that. So my parents, the Jacksons came on it was the second leg of the Destiny Tour. So it was right after Off the Wall came out. And my parents had, promised they knew how much, I loved Michael. And they liked the family as well. And so they had promised to take us to that show. And so it was in the days where you had to actually physically go to the box office and buy the tickets. And so my parents waited a little bit too late. And when we got there, the only seats that were available were behind the stage. And so my parents were not going to pay for that. And so I remember crying my eyes out for days, begging, trying to figure out a way. And I'd never forget that show was on a Sunday. And I just remember that whole Sunday, I was just so sad because I wanted to go. I went to bed crying. I was begging, can we just go down there and just stand around? And so it just, I was a mess. I was a wreck for weeks after that. And so what ended up happening was they promised to take us to the next show that I wanted to go to. And so the next show that I wanted to go to was Rick James on the Fired Up Tour. Rick James and Prince opening. This would have been in 1980.
Wow.
So to let you guys,
incredible.
To let you guys know, 1979, I was 7 years old, and there was 3 albums that were on my turntable that entire year. Michael's Off the Wall, Rick James Busting Out of L7, and Prince's second album. I played those 3 albums to death in 1979. And so when I saw the commercial for the Rick James Fired Up Tour with Prince opening, I begged and okay, sure. And so they took us. So now you have to remember, when went to the show, I was actually 8 at the time. When Prince came on, and Prince did his typical Prince thing in 1980. It was raunchy. It was a great set. It was phenomenal. But my father was he was fit to be tied after that, because he did not appreciate seeing a man in bikini shorts playing his guitar, sticking his tongue out, tonguing his keyboard player. And at the end, Prince even put his hand down his bikini. My father was ready to go. So I begged, said, Daddy, please, can we just, because I really was a big Rick James fan. Please, can we just stay for Rick James? So he agreed. Well, the lights went out, and then the lights went out and the smoke went up. And I mean the smoke from everybody in the crowd firing up the marijuana. And he had this big prop, this marijuana come down from the ceiling and was right in the middle of the stage, and there was smoke coming out of it. And Rick came out and he was in rare form. I mean, he came out with a joint in his hand. I don't recall him really finishing a song, and he said something to he fired up a joint, and I remember him saying, there was cops in front of him, and I said, I dare one of these MFers, take it from me. And my father looked at me and I'm like, no, this is not going to end well. And it was bad. And my dad, he said, okay, we're done. I don't think we got to the middle of this set. And you know what? I was okay with it, because I realized as an 8-year-old, I was probably not supposed to be at that show.
You were out of your depth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did your dad not know about Rick James as a performer?
Here's the thing. Back in 1980, there were no videos. So we just, you saw them on American Bandstand, you saw them on Soul Train, you saw them on these different shows.
On their best behavior.
Right, very sanitized. So you didn't really know that. And then if you really go back and listen to those lyrics are just as bad as the lyrics today. They were just, they had a way of writing it where you didn't realize what they were talking about. And so, my dad, he was a big Otis Redding, Johnny Taylor, Tyrone Davis, he was a fan of that music. So he didn't really he didn't listen to the music that much. So he was not happy. And so when the Jacksons came around for the Triumph tour, I think he was very happy to take us to see that one, because he kind of knew that would not go the way of Rick James and Prince. And so he made sure he got the tickets early. We had great seats. It was in August of 81. And I can just tell you, when I go back and think about that time, I loved Michael so much. I loved the brothers so much. And to actually know that I was going to be in the same building with them, I think I was just on pins and needles the entire week. And so when I finally got there, I remember Stacey Lattisaw was the opening act. And so I was just, I liked her at the time. I thought she was cute and she had some great songs. And, okay, Stacey, you can get off the stage now, because I'm ready to see the brothers. And so what really stands out to me about that show, that's why I feel like it needs to be, when they finally release it, it needs to be a theatrical release, because the lights went out, the crowd was going crazy. Then all you see is the screen come down. Like, okay, what's going on here? I mean, I'm not here to watch them on the screen. I want to see them. But then the screen comes down, and then you see the beginning of the Can You Feel It video. And, at the beginning of that video, it says "in the beginning." And it was just that booming voice throughout. And you just sat back and you were in awe. Like, what is this? Because you didn't have videos. You didn't see that. And so to see them up on the screen in that video, the way they were portrayed, Questlove said it in one of his podcasts a couple of weeks ago when he did the Jacksons. They were superheroes to us. And in that moment, the Jacksons became my superheroes. And so to sit there and watch that and have that boom right out at you and see those visuals, it was just, I was in awe. I'm like, okay, I could go home now. But then the screen went up. Randy comes out, which was a feat in and of itself because just the year prior, Randy was in that big accident in his car. And there was questions of whether he'll walk again. But then Randy comes out. He has this torch and he has like this, this knight in shining armor outfit on. And then the brothers come up from the bottom of the stage and they start performing. And I'm going to tell you, I was just in awe. My mouth was open. I was dancing. I was screaming. It is by far, and people, I see people debate this all the time. And once I say this, and people may tweet at me about this, I do believe that is Michael's peak vocal performance. People say the bad tour, but I think Michael was at his best. I always feel like Michael was at his best when he's with his brothers. But when I look back at footage of that tour and just to see how loose he was, how carefree he was, how strong his voice was, I mean, it was no wonder that Thriller happened. It was just an amazing tour. And I know, Jamon, you and I had a conversation about this, but I think when I think back to that tour, Randy absolutely stands out to me because of his energy with Michael. Randy was just all over the stage, whether he was on the bongos, whether he was on the piano, whether he's dancing. He was just as energetic as Michael. Not more, but I think he really, and when you see the two of them together, it was just an energy that could not be matched. And so it was always, that was the one thing when you saw Mike, and I saw Mike on the Bad Tour, that was always missing from his performance, just that interaction with Randy on stage. And Randy was he was a revelation for me, just to see how talented he was, or he is, and just how he really did fit in with the brothers after Jermaine left.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like when I look at Michael Jackson's later tours, I mean, especially the 90s, they seem, they're big productions, there's a lot of dance numbers, there's a lot of things going on, tanks rolling on stage, all of that. But really, it's quite sterile in a way compared to how organic and natural all of that late 70s, early 80s stuff is. And, there's a horn section, there's Randy on piano. It's just, It's all real and authentic, and it's happening right there. And that's what I think fans are craving for these days, is that the authenticity. And I can't wait for some of that stuff to come out.
You're right. The horn section, the Jacksons, the horn section on all of their albums are just phenomenal. And just to see it was a huge, you're right. The later shows, Michael's later shows had a lot of theatrics. This one, it was just the power of Michael, the brothers, and the band. And it was just, they didn't need all the other stuff. Now, they did have some theatrics, at the very beginning with Randy. They did something in the middle with Heartbreak Hotel. And then obviously the segue from Working Day and Night into Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. But they were just a powerhouse. Best concert I've ever seen in my life, by far. And I've seen Michael 3 times. I saw the Victory Tour. Victory Tour was good because you had Jermaine there. And so that really kind of completed it. But Jackie wasn't performing with him on that tour. So it was kind of missing something. So the Triumph Tour is just by far his strongest. And I'll say this also. If Michael stopped performing right then and there, he was already a Hall of Famer. He was already a legend. And I think anything after that, we should have expected it, but it's really a bonus because he was just, I wouldn't have been disappointed. Let's put it that way. I would not have been disappointed because he was just at his best on that tour.
Q, do you have anything to ask there? I've got lots of things, but I want to hand over to you if you want.
Oh my God, I'm like just going along with the journey. I think I want to know your dad's reaction.
So
the difference between the two shows, and how did he react after all the theatrics and then the show, seeing the Jacksons? I'm really curious.
So we were a Jackson family, so they loved them, and so it was not. We loved the show, and I remember when they released the live album. I begged for that when they got me that for Christmas. And so I know my mother really liked The Things I Do For You. That was her song. That is her song. So that was one she always wanted me to play. But they, we thoroughly loved the show. He thoroughly loved the show. There was no complaints from him as opposed to the Prince and Rick James show. But I always tell people, and I've mentioned it to you guys, I always think that period between 75 and 81 is just I hate to call it the Lost Jackson era, but there's never a lot of focus on that area. So I'm glad you mentioned at the beginning where fans, when they started becoming fans, because I know there's a lot of us who were fans back then and we really crave that material, the Gamble and Huff material. And, we'd love, like, I remember their variety show. And that was, the Jacksons on TV, every week in the summertime, that was a thing. And so I never missed an episode. And it was I was captivated just seeing them. And then when it ended in 77, they never showed reruns of it. So you never ever saw it again until I was in college. I went to the University of Michigan. And I worked in a record store. So shout out to Michigan Warehouse Records in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I worked in a record store, so I would always get these trade magazines. And so I found one where someone was selling, Michael videos and Jackson videos. And I was able to find those TV show episodes. And I know there's a couple of the guys on campus, which was rare in 1992 and 93 during the Pearl Jam, the grunge, West Coast hip hop era, to find true Michael Jackson fans. I remember finding a couple of guys, Derek Kirkwood and Anwar Hankerson. Those are my buddies, my Jackson fan buddies from Michigan. And we would, they invite them over to the house and we would watch those old TV shows and just remember how much we loved the Jacksons. And so it was that's a period where you get to hear Michael in a way that you've never really heard him, but you can hear the growth. So if you go back to that first Gamble and Huff album, there are songs on that album that are just phenomenal. Like for instance, my favorite on that album is Style of Life. And just the way Michael really, just the way he sings that song. And that's a true Gamble and Huff song too. Like you can hear that's the OJs, that Teddy Pendergrass, that beat that's a true Gamble and Huff beat, and Michael on top of it, and the way he sings that song, he never really gets back to that, but you can see how he incorporates elements of that in later work. Even if you go to Find Me a Girl on Going Places, just at the end we said, when I find her, what you gonna do? I'm gonna be good to her. You don't hear that again until Lady in My Life. There's like things like that you pick up on, like, oh, that's where he got it from. And then you go back and you hear and you start making the connections. Yeah. And so those are, I've actually Kenny Gamble does he does a Facebook Live. He used to do a Facebook Live. And I think I've asked him a couple times, are there any material, extra material from that time? And I think the response that I've gotten, I don't know if I've gotten it from him or others, that all of that material was lost in a fire. And so if there was that material to begin with. So that's just material. Those are performances that you just don't, you can hear his growth. You hear where he was going with things. You hear how he picked up on things and how he, eventually brought them back later on. And sorry for singing. When I get into it,
No, we love it. We love the geeking out. Trust me. First of all, I want to say that fans today that have grown up in the YouTube era do not understand the struggle of trying to track down other MJ fans to find VHS material. Like, that is a thing that when it happened, right. It was like when you found that tape, it was like, the heavens open up. You finally go, people don't understand that. But also I want to say, you just made me think about this whole Gamble and Huff era and the two albums that they did with the Jacksons, the Jacksons self-titled album, and then Going Places. These are great albums. To me, these are like 5-star albums. And I can't help but think that there must have been some frustration amongst the Jacksons camp at the time around, I mean, these albums did reasonably well. They kind of peaked at, Going Places peaked at 63 on the Billboard 200. These albums didn't have the success at all that the later stuff would have, especially when the Jacksons started producing their own material. But nonetheless, they are still incredible albums. The title song, Going Places itself, is so funky. Yes. And I just can't help but think that the Jacksons were wondering at that point, why are we not having the same level of success that we did when we were the Jackson 5? I don't know. Like, I guess what I'm asking is why do you think the Gamble and Huff stuff didn't break through as much as their self-produced stuff did with Destiny onwards?
That's a really good question, and I would love to hear. I don't think I've ever really watched an interview with Gamble and Huff where they really talk about this. But when I listen to those albums, you really get the sense that they themselves were trying to figure out what to do with the Jacksons, especially on that first album, the self-titled album, because you have some really strong songs. Show You the Way to Go, Blues Away. Those are some great songs, but then they throw in Strength of a Man, where it just kind of, it seems like they're trying to force the whole message song on them, where it doesn't really necessarily flow as well. So I really do think, and I would love to hear their take on it. And I think Going Places is a more consistent album. And so I don't know if that's just people were still adjusting to the fact that they were not on Motown and didn't have that traditional Motown sound. Just adjusting to the fact Jermaine's not in the group anymore. But I will tell you this, of the songs that get played a lot on Black radio, Show You the Way to Go and Good Times are probably the two most played songs. So whereas they didn't have the success in terms of sales, I will tell you Good Times and Show You the Way to Go, I hear that played on the radio all the time. Now you don't necessarily hear material from, other than Blame It on the Boogie. You hear Blame It on the Boogie, but you won't hear material from Destiny and Triumph played today as much as you hear, Show You the Way to Go and Good Times. So that's interesting in and of itself.
Yeah.
And I just think Good Times is such an underrated song and such an underrated performance by Michael. It just gets, overlooked. But I think that was probably the best Gamble and Huff produced Jackson song, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree that these albums, like the Gamble and Huff ones and then the Jacksons' self-produced albums, Destiny and Triumph, like to me, artistically, they're a peak for Michael's career in a way, in terms of using real organic instruments and jamming with his brothers and growing these songs. And it must have been such a feeling for them of frustration that some of these albums weren't going to the level that they had achieved before as the Jackson 5. And I can't help but wonder whether that feeling, if they did in fact have it, then was what spurred Michael on to achieve what he did with Off the Wall and even Thriller.
Well, Michael talked a lot about learning how to structure a song from Gamble and Huff. And so I think, I think he really did take a lot from that period. And I think that allowed them to get to the point where they felt comfortable with Destiny. And so that's why I think Destiny sounds so good and it sounds raw. And then when you get to Triumph is definitely more polished. I always called Triumph an extension of Off the Wall, because it does have that polished sound to it. Whereas, Destiny, you could tell they were cutting their teeth. They were trying it for the first time and they happened to nail it on that first try. But I think it's because they really did study Gamble and Huff. And I think where they didn't have that success in terms of sales, it was a success in terms of what they learned from those two.
I think also, wasn't the music industry and the sound of the era really trying to find its place? Like, there was a lot happening at the time. Like, disco was sort of, I guess, starting out or partway through the whole disco era. And I guess people were really exploring new sounds and genres in a way, like where am I going to fit now as an artist? So I guess that probably impacted record sales a bit as well.
And then you also had Michael's changing voice, they're changing style, they're changing labels. So there was, I think a lot went into that, but I think it all benefited them going through that rough patch and then coming out on the other side with Destiny.
And we use rough patch as a very loose term.
Yes.
That was still happening.
It was amazing.
I agree. I agree. That's my favorite period. But just in terms of, I think when you look at it, like, okay, they hit a lull right there in terms of sales and success that they had before. But you're right. That's not to mean that I'm not saying that the music was not good, because I love those two albums.
Absolutely,
those are 5-star albums.
Yeah. Like even now, like I've got That's What You Get and Shake Your Body, and even a bit later, like The Hurt. Not The Hurt, sorry, The Weight. I've got those tracks added into like a sort of disco playlist of mine, as well as Hello, of course, Off the Wall songs.
Mm-hmm.
Heaps, like 5 or 6 of those, I think, on my playlist for disco music. And they're just brilliant. Like when they come on with all the other disco stuff around it, which is some of the older stuff and then more recent disco stuff, that because there's been a bit of a resurgence in that sound in the last couple of years, like those songs are just magic.
So you happen to mention probably my favorite. I will call this probably the most important song in the Jackson catalog.
Which one?
That's What You Get for Being Polite.
Oh, isn't it just perfect?
I'm going to tell you, I've put this on Twitter and I've said this. I could write an essay and
write the essay. We'll read it.
And honestly, if they do a biopic, this is one of those biopics where, they need to start with that song and then go back and then move on and then, work their way back up. I just think that song, the way that Michael sings it, what he's singing about, he's telling us, he told us, and I'm not into saying that Michael, he was like Nostradamus, or how you ever pronounce it, that he was, predicting his life, but he really did. And if you go back and listen to it, he told us about his life and how his life what would become of his life. Something's deep inside of him, eating up the pride in him that makes him buy things for the girls. And it's just like, you hear it. And it was almost like Michael was saying, all right, this was my life. Was my life up until this point. And so now what this song does is it's slamming the door on little Michael, and then it's opening the door to the adult Michael. And so he told us how he got to this point and what's going to happen after. And so that is the one song that when I listen to it, it truly brings me to tears, because I hear what he's saying. I know what his life was like at the time, and I know what became of his life. And it's just, he laid it out. He told us who he was. He told us what was going to happen to him. And if we had just listened, at the time, we would have realized and understood him more. But I think that is just, even at the end, when he's almost like he's pleading, Jack still often cries because there is no love. And just the way he says that, often cries because there is no love. It's just like, that's who he was.
Oh, man. Goosebump moments right now.
I can go on and on and on for that one.
For the next 4 hours, we're going to be discussing this song.
That's an essay. That's an essay if you really broke it down. I think I've gotten into some discussions with other people who kind of agree that to me is a very important song. I think it comes at an important time in his career. It is fittingly the last song on Destiny. And the next thing you hear from Michael is Off the Wall. And so it is just, I always say that song just slammed the door on that little Michael phase. And then it opened the door to the adult Michael.
I think the placement of that song, and then, yes, leading into Off the Wall, I think that was absolutely intentional. 100%.
Yep.
Do you think, Shawn, that it's been difficult for some of the siblings, like Michael's brothers and sisters, to try and fight for their own name to get out there amidst Michael and Janet's just astronomical success?
I've often said that, the family is very talented, and Jermaine has some phenomenal albums. If you go back and and obviously I think he has the most solo albums of all of the siblings.
Even more than LaToya?
Well, you know what? Let me take that back. You're right. I think LaToya may have him beat. I have to go back and double check. But some of those Jermaine albums right after he left Motown are just great records. And so I think he really did struggle a little bit in terms of, trying to get his footing. But I mean, if you go back and listen to that Frontiers album, it's a great record. It is. I mean, it has one of my favorite Jermaine songs in Castles of Sand. I mean, that is top 5 Jackson material right there for me. If I start listing, what's my favorite Jackson songs, Castles of Sand is my number one Jermaine performance. But he just had some great records. And unfortunately, he did get overshadowed by Michael. But what I liked about Jermaine is that he just kept going. He just kept putting out records. And he didn't really stray from that formula. And so I was glad when he had the success, but Let's Get Serious. And so I think the one brother that really I don't want to use the word disappointed, but I just wanted so much more from him, and that's just Randy. Randy had so much potential, and we just didn't get enough material out of Randy. I even like the song from 1978, How Can I Be Sure? I think that's a great song. I think Randy's a decent vocalist. And it's just so disappointing that we just didn't get more material from him, because I think he had a lot. Or, I would have loved to see him collaborate with Michael a little bit more. So I think it was definitely hard, but I think Jermaine was the one who I think, he has some great material, and I think he does get a lot of love now from fans. I know a lot of fans who, we have great conversations, about those Jermaine albums. And so I think it's just unfortunate that, Michael just took off the way that he did. But I think, there's always time to rediscover those albums and make sure that, people understand how great they are.
Okay, we're going to do this one rapid fire. So I'm going to ask you what your favorite Jackson stuff is, and you got to say which one and why as well. All right. So let's go. What's your favorite Jackson's album and why?
Destiny. Just the time that it came out, I was such a Jackson's fan. I love that album start to finish. It's not a bad song on the album.
Favorite Jackson's song and why? Well, you've kind of already said that, I think.
I've already said That's What You Get for Being Polite. It's just an important song for so many reasons.
Okay. Video.
Jackson's. I'm going to have to go with Can You Feel It?
Reason
because when I saw it, and I think I mentioned this earlier in the show, I was not a fan of that song when I listened to the album, but I became a fan because I had that visual, and seeing it in concert like that just blew me away.
And favorite Jackson's tour and why?
Triumph Tour. First time seeing the brothers. I think Michael was at his peak vocally. The brothers were just tight. The band was tight. It was just a big performance, and it was just a show like no other.
Okay, and favorite, a bit of a different question, but favorite Jackson Brothers look and why?
I am a fan of the 78 afros. Anything that 77, 78 look, which I think always get overlooked in terms of when people put these collages of Michael throughout the years, they always miss that. So I like, if you open up the gatefold for Destiny, that's it for me.
Yeah.
That's it.
The photo shoot where Michael's wearing the red tartan shirt and the big afro, that is, I don't know what photo shoot that was. Is that in the Destiny booklet? But that is great.
Yes. And he has like the white scarf around his neck.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
That's cool. Q.
All right, Shawn. Here we go. Your favorite MJ solo album, and this can be right from Motown right through to adult. Yeah, these are tough.
It will have to be. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit here. It will have to be Off the Wall, but I'm gonna say followed closely by Thriller and Dangerous, and then History. And it's not to slight the Motown solo work, because I absolutely adore Music in Me. Love that album. That song Up Again is my favorite solo Michael song, one of my favorites. So, but yeah, Off the Wall.
I think we might have the same ranking. I put a ranking out the other day on Twitter, and I think we got the same one. Man, I copped some heat for that, let me tell you.
All right. Favorite MJ solo song?
I am going to go with Working Day and Night.
Ooh,
Nice.
yeah.
That one performed live got better each time.
Yeah.
Like a fine wine.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
What about video?
It would have to be, again, I'm going to cheat on this one. It would have to be Thriller, followed very closely by Smooth Criminal and Remember the Time.
Excellent. And what about tour for you?
It would be The Bad. That was the only solo tour that I saw. And I actually agree with Charles Thompson, where anything after that, it was just, it was not as good as the Bad tour. So Bad tour. And I actually saw the Bad tour, Palace of Auburn Hills. Great, great show.
And then look, your favorite MJ style and look.
Solo look. It would have to be that look between, because this is still the solo period, but it's that look between Off the Wall and Thriller.
Ooh.
Like right in there with that Triumph look, right there. Cool. I had Michael Jackson stuff all over my walls from that period, right there.
Man, vintage. So Shawn, why is it that you think some MJ fans, some Michael fans focus all in on the adult solo stuff?
Well, obviously, I think it's because it was where he hit his, I call it his second peak, and his second peak in his career was the biggest peak in any entertainer's career. And I think you got a lot of fans who are younger, and so that's what they know. And so that's why I was listening to you guys. Was it not the last show before last, where Charles Thompson was on? You guys were talking about, do you still listen to Michael's music? And he made a comment. And Charles, I'm not trying to misquote you. I think you said something to the effect of, you don't really listen to the Motown stuff. Where I think that is there's a gold mine of material, and I think there are certain segments of the fans who really. We really love that time. We love that period, but we just get overshadowed by some of the younger fans and those who came after Thriller. But, that Motown stuff is just to hear Michael's development from 1969 with Bobby Taylor working with him. And I know Bobby Taylor talked about how he really was trying to break Michael of this habit of saying, ooh, all the time, like that James Brown kind of style, and trying to break him. And then if you go back and listen to some of those rare cuts, like A Fool for You, compare A Fool for You to Who's Loving You, and you can see the development in just a short amount of time that, Bobby was able to help and develop his style. And so just to kind of hear it, progress even through his, puberty, where his voice starts to change, this just a gold mine worth of material that when you go back and listen to it, I'm constantly rediscovering things as I hear it. So, I think people they tend to want to focus on, when Michael was like this mega star, as opposed to really digging into when he was a huge star back in the 70s as well.
Yeah, like the evolution and the roots, where he came from.
Correct. Absolutely.
And there's so much of it. I think that's daunting for people as well, that the amount of material from those early years right through to like Off the Wall, the amount of material is probably maybe scaring some people off. I don't know.
Well, and then people don't realize that in the 70s, I believe there was an album released on the Jackson every year from 1969 until 82. And so you had about a 14-year period where there's just Jackson material every single year. And so, yes, it can be very daunting, and you can, just rely on the hits as opposed to really digging in and listening to Darling Dear and listening to Michael and James Jamerson, how they sound together, or, going and listening to the song To Know off of Looking Through the Windows and listening to how they kind of put a little Al Green spin on Michael and the brothers. So it's just, those are things that you really pick up on when you go back and listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to ask, you saw the Triumph tour. What other occasions were you able to see either the Jacksons, and then you said you saw Michael on the Bad tour, but also earlier in the episode you dropped that you sort of saw Michael close up once, like you did meet Tito and got, your Destiny album autographed, and you mentioned that you did get close to Michael once. So can I hear those stories, please?
Absolutely. So Michael came, this would have been the late 90s. I want to say this was either 97 or 98. He partnered up with Don Barton. Don Barton was from Detroit. And
the casino thing.
Casinos. Yes. And he was going to build a casino in Detroit. So they proposed. So this was when we have casinos now in Detroit. And so this was when they were all making their pitches. And so Don Barton partnered with Michael. And so he brought Michael to a venue called Shane Park at the time. It's now been renamed the Aretha Franklin Amphitheater. And so he brought Michael there, and they were free tickets. And I'm telling you, it was sold out. I went down there and got tickets, and we sat around and waited just for Michael to come and address the crowd and leave. And that was it. There was no performance. There was nothing other than Michael coming and saying hello to the fans and why he's partnering with Don Barton and why, he feels like there should be a casino here. Don Barton and Michael and him should be awarded the casino in Detroit. And that was it. I think he stayed on stage for 5 minutes and he left. And we all dispersed. And so I was actually down there and met a couple guys. And so we decided to kind of hang around to see if we could figure out where Michael was staying. And so he was staying in downtown Detroit, the Renaissance Center. So we hung around downstairs for a while. Somehow we figured out what floor he was on. And so I think we had to sneak to get onto the elevator, but we ended up getting onto the elevator and we got up to the floor. And so when the elevator opened, this is a true story, elevator opened, there's this huge security guard sitting in a chair, and he gets up and he stands in the doorway thinking, okay, we're not getting past this guy. But then there's Don Barton and his wife there as well. And so then they get on, and then we just said, hey, how are you guys doing? So good. And I said, well, we were just hoping that we can meet Michael. And he said, well, he did a side like that. I'm thinking, okay, there's a chance. He said, well, Michael just went to bed. He just laid down. And so, unfortunately, you guys not going to be able to make it happen. I'm like, it's like, he's right down the hall. You could just escort us right down the hall. And so Don Barton was a really nice guy. He talked to us all the way down the elevator. And so after that, we just gave up. But we made a shot, and we gave it a shot, and we were right there, Had we probably been there maybe 10 minutes earlier, we may have been able to talk to the security guard, talk him into, letting us hang out up there, but it didn't happen. So I got that close.
That's a cool story.
That's a very cool story.
Yeah. I can just imagine the elevator doors opening and this mountain of a security man, and you'd be like,
okay.
Yes, this is not going to happen. But then to have Don Barton standing right there, I'm like, okay, maybe we can ask him. And he was nice enough, but we didn't. It didn't work for us that night.
Still exciting.
Yes.
All right. And what were the tours that you've seen all up?
So I've seen the Triumph Tour, the Victory Tour, and the Bad Tour.
Wow.
That's ridiculous.
What a roster right there, my God.
Yes. And the Victory Tour was everything that you've heard it to be. It was I remember my cousin Amy and I were big fans. So we went to that one together. Our families went together. And just being at that show with her was exciting, but it wasn't as good as the Triumph Tour, but it was everything that I thought it would be, and I'm glad I had that experience.
So why was it not as good?
So again, I think part of it was with Jackie not being there. To me, that was huge for me. Him and Marlon, there was a chemistry between the two of them that once Marlon was on his own, it was just not there. And I liked having Jermaine there as well, but it just didn't have the raw feeling of the Triumph tour. Obviously you had the Thriller material, but it just didn't. When I think back on those tours, and I think, had I not seen the Triumph tour, I would definitely say, the Victory. If I had gone to the Destiny tour and then skipped Triumph and went to Victory, then I would definitely say Victory. But there was just an electric atmosphere around Triumph and it probably was because it was my first time seeing them. It just couldn't compare. Victory couldn't compare to Triumph.
All right. So I got a question. There's a few sort of questions I want to ask now. As someone who operates in a school, I hear Michael's name come up sort of all the time in class. I've got a picture of Michael on my classroom wall. And because I have a history classroom, I've got all of these color images on the front wall of my classroom of individuals that have shaped the world somehow, for good or bad, really, just notable figures. And Michael's face is right there. I weave his art and his story into my history lessons, and I hear some really wild theories coming out from kids about him, like Michael turned himself white. He wanted to be white, all of that kind of stuff. Then you get the molestation sort of comments get thrown around by kids. And I'm sure that in your career, you must have had that happen to you as well in the classroom. And I wanted to know from you is like, how do you approach that? How do you approach those opinions or conversations?
In the school setting, actually, I think because they know I love Michael so much, I don't get the negative now. But before, it was just a matter of I'm all about, I don't try to, as an educator, I don't try to push, my philosophy or doctrine on any student, but I always try to enlighten them to the point to where they would actually think about it and come to their own conclusions. And so really kind of talking to them on those levels. But the number one thing I always do is just let's redirect it back to the music. Let's redirect it to, why I love him. The kids always ask me to dance like Michael. So every once in a while in the cafeteria, I'll do that for them. And so I've really tried to have fun with it more than anything else. It's so funny because when the pandemic started and we went on lockdown, I did a Facebook Live for my families. And so as a part of that, I had my own family in the video with me. And I just ended it with, I said, you guys all know I'm a huge Jackson 5 fan. I said, so just so you know, I'll always be there. Then my family, we broke out into I'll be there.
Oh, man, that's awesome.
Oh,
and
that's
so we're
cute.
all singing, I'll be there. So it's just, and so that really kind of breaks that whole negative, perception people may have of Michael. So I started doing Facebook Lives throughout the pandemic. So I would wear my Jackson shirts on and the parents would point it out. And I would mention, this would be this is the 1978 logo. And then I would wear another one from the Triumph era logo. And I would just explain that to them. And so, I really try to make it about, I allow my community and my students to know who I am, and I just focus it right back on the music. And it's funny because I've never had that negative conversation with students lately. It doesn't come up. The kids like Michael, they like the videos, and so that's really what they focus on.
He's huge on TikTok, from what I've heard. Like MJ music and dancing, and people dancing to MJ music is like ginormously massive on TikTok.
So there was a video last year that came out of a teacher. It's a black teacher with black students. They were doing in the hallway. They were doing a Thriller. I don't know if you guys saw.
I remember.
I saw.
That was good.
Yeah, that was amazing.
So the interesting tidbit of that, I used to be the principal at that school.
Oh, you planted
the legacy lives on.
Yeah.
I used to be the principal at that school. I was only the principal there for 1 year, but it was interesting when that went, because then people who know that I love Michael, they start sending it to me. And I said, the ironic part is I used to be the principal in that building.
You would have been so proud of that school.
I was very proud.
Yeah. That was a good one.
Will somebody just hurry up and give you the Principal of the Year award? I mean, come on.
Well, I try. I try really hard. It's a fun job, and I hate to be leaving it, but it's time. But I enjoy it.
Well, now you get to go on and inspire other newer principals.
Yes, hopefully.
Okay, now I've got a question for you about Michael's changing appearance over the years and how you viewed that, I guess, as a black man yourself. And obviously Michael's appearance started to change long before he gave that famous interview to Oprah where he talked about vitiligo. So I guess, and I know you're only one man in the black community, but how did you personally process that when that was going on? And what sort of conversations did you have with other people in the community about it?
Well, it was difficult. It was difficult to watch. Now I will tell you that between Thriller and Bad, you just tended to think there was more makeup than anything else. You didn't think that it would progress to the point where it did. But, that was the time where, Michael was, wasn't viewed as not as popular anymore. You had the rap music, hip hop music starting to take off in the mainstream. And so, there was a time where Michael just wasn't as popular and he was the butt of a lot of jokes. But I will also say that Michael was the butt of a lot of jokes back in the 70s as well. And so there were always questions about his sexuality. And I think that was the persistent joke or rumor in the 70s. And that just continued throughout his life. But, as his appearance, especially with the Dangerous album, and that's where you began to have those conversations. You just didn't know. And that's part of the thing. I always tell people, had Michael just come right out and said he had vitiligo at the time, we would have understood. But when it happened, people were saying he wants to be white. Look at his nose, look at his skin. He doesn't. So he took a lot of heat, and I had a lot of those conversations with people, and it was tough. It was tough to try and defend without knowing. And so once he came out and said he had vitiligo, I think my great grandfather had vitiligo, and he lived to be well over 100 years old. So I saw how what it looked like up close and personal, and so it made sense. But just during that time, it was really tough. I was starting college right when the Dangerous album dropped. And I was on an island. There wasn't many Michael Jackson fans who loved him as much as I did. And, there was a lot of jokes and there was a lot of people who just didn't understand it. But, it's funny. But when you put the music on, they would absolutely, jam to the music. But when it came to that conversation about his blackness, they questioned it, and it was tough. And so over time, you don't have those questions anymore. You don't have those conversations as often. I think people now understand. I think with him passing away, people give him, more the benefit of the doubt more than they did back then.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it, especially because he did start to talk about it a little bit more in Oprah and then the Martin Bashir interview, and then the autopsy report confirmed his vitiligo.
Correct.
So with the benefit of hindsight, I guess maybe one could say, hey, it would have been great for him to come out a little earlier and say what he was going through. But yeah, you're right. There's less of those conversations now as people learn about it.
Yeah, but then now you get a chance to see, how truly, what's the word? How do I want to put this? Michael was fearless in the industry, and I always said there's a couple things, 3 things that happened that really kind of changed the course of his life and his career. He made the biggest selling album of the world, went on the biggest tour, and then bought the biggest music catalog. And all that happened within like a 4 or 5 year span. And when those things happened, he did something that no artist really, and especially no other black artist, had ever done. And so he was in control. He had firm control of his career and the entertainment industry. And, it just, then his appearance starts to change, and he became a lightning rod for negativity moving forward.
So, Shawn, you've really touched on my next question, and I guess there's no debate that Michael has really become a massive target in the media with so much fame and success and groundbreaking musical art. With that has also come this incredible target on his back in a way. Now, what I would like to know from you is, why do you think he became a big target? Do you think it was because of that unprecedented success you talked about earlier, or was it the choices Michael made in his life, or was it a mix? Why has he become such a target?
Personally, I think it was a mix, but I think it also goes back to if you really stop and think about it. And I think there could be a documentary done on this. You know, if you look at that period between in 1982 when he was recording Thriller, when he released Thriller, how massive Thriller was at the time, then going on that Victory tour, the biggest tour of the time, and then buying the ATV catalog. He just did something, like I just said before, he just did something that no Black artist would ever imagine doing. And then on top of that, buying Neverland. And so I just really think it started there. And I don't like to necessarily get into conspiracy theories, but you can definitely see that's where his trouble started. You know, it just, you almost feel like someone, you know, or some people say, well, you know, he's getting a little too big for his britches. And so we may have to take him down a peg or two. I wouldn't be surprised if those conversations indeed happen. But I also think that Michael even said it, and that's what you get for being polite. Something's deep inside in him, eating up the pride. It makes him do things that he should not do. I think that's well documented, that when Michael set his mind on something, you really couldn't talk him out of it. And in fact, the more you tried to talk him out of it, the more he would want to do it. And so I think a lot of that stubbornness kind of didn't help him either. And so I just think had he just made Thriller and just kind of went underground, it would have been no issues. But I think he just continued to ascend in different ways. And I think that made him a target. I think the Thriller and the buying the music catalog, I think those two things were just a no-no for Black artists. And Michael was able to pull it off.
I think he dared to do it. He dared to do it. And I think definitely and even like sort of what we talked about earlier episode with Lil Nas X, he dared to do it. And he knew that it would get a certain reaction from some people, but that was a glass ceiling for like Lil Nas X to smash through. And then Michael was smashing through those glass ceilings in quick succession, making huge waves. And absolutely, I think that helped put that target on his back, because it was attention, and some people were like, well, hang on a minute, he's getting too big for his boots.
Yep. And again, I think, you know, and I can understand, you know, we're all like that sometimes, where if you tell us not to do something and we shouldn't do something and we just want to do it anyway. And so I think there are some personal decisions that he made. You know, I certainly get it. I certainly get that he wanted to recapture, you know, his childhood. He wanted to, you know, create a place where kids can come. But that came with the allegations, that came with, you know, things that people were going to say. And so I think he really did put himself in that position, but doesn't necessarily mean that he needed to be accused of it. But it just, you know, he put himself in that predicament, unfortunately.
So since Michael passed away in 2009, how have you seen his estate handling his legacy? How would you, I guess, you know, if you had to give them an appraisal, how good a job they're doing, what's your opinion?
So I'm going to quote one of my favorite Twitter friends, Jason Anderson. He goes by many different Twitter names, but he absolutely despises the estate.
Sounds like a great guy. I want to be friends with him too.
He's taking a break from Twitter, and I told him I was going to drop his name on this, so I'm gonna make sure you guys connect. But he despises the he goes on. He writes. He's written letters to them. He's written emails, and he's gotten, you know, not so nice responses from them. You know, I just wish they had. It doesn't seem like they have a plan at all in terms of what they want to do and how they want to do it. I get that there may not be a lot of material in the vault, and there may be questions around whether Michael would have wanted it released or not. But I do believe there is some material there, and I would love to see some of that material released. As I stated earlier, I would love to see a Triumph tour release, even the Victory tour. I would love to see, you know, those are things, and I love what Spike Lee did with Off the Wall, love what he did with Bad, wouldn't mind him doing something with Triumph as well. But those are things that they really should be doing. I'd love to see them doing. If there's some material, some Jackson's material in the vault, I'd love to hear it. It's not like other artists where you may have, tons of material there, but, give us something. And, obviously, the Twitter account is certainly not the best. If it has the feel of trolling fans and things of that nature, and that's certainly not what Michael would have wanted. And so the only thing is, I just wish they had a plan. Obviously, you missed the anniversary of Dangerous. You missed the anniversary of History. I would love to see them roll out CD sets where they're quality. We get some bonus material. We get some real quality material. We're just not getting it. So, I kind of have to agree with Jason. I'm not a huge fan right now, but I do want them to get better at what they're doing.
But Michael. Shawn, they didn't miss the Dangerous and History anniversaries. They put hoodies out for those. We got hoodies. Come on.
Some people are probably still waiting for them to arrive.
Well, yeah, I guess. I got to give them credit for that, right? Yes, you're right. Got to give them credit for that. I just wish they would have. I want to hear a remastered version of Monkey Business. It's one of my favorite tracks from that era. So just give me a remastered version of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it hurts a lot of us because we can see the potential of what, sure, we don't know exactly what is left in the vault, so to speak, but the potential of what we were given over the decades in the first place, like the potential of the quality of that stuff and where that could be expanded out to in like tour packages and, just what he gave us in his own lifetime, that is enough that you could still just celebrate and keep moving it forward to new fans and new products and stuff. And it just hurts so much.
Well, and there's so many great stories about how Michael created in the studio. There's the story of, even when you go back to, there's this video that was going around a few months ago, Tom Baylor talking about, the creation of She's Out of My Life and Michael's performance of it. You get so many of those stories. Obviously you got Brad Sundberg, who, he has a ton of stories. So you get all these stories. You got to believe that they can pull all that stuff together and put together a documentary on Michael's creative process. We just don't see that. I mean, so those are the little things. And, we were talking about the biopic earlier. Someone on Twitter put out a good suggestion. I would actually love to see this as well. Instead of doing a biopic, why don't you go back and recreate the 2004 trial, the trial, recreate that just from the court transcripts. I think Court TV even did it at the time. But go back and recreate that. If you want to dispel some of those rumors, dispel some of the misinformation out there, why not create a biopic around that trial using the trial transcripts? That in and of itself could destroy the notion that Michael was guilty of doing anything in that particular case.
Yeah, definitely. That trial especially is such a lens into his life because they were, the DA was allowed to bring in historic claims to that trial. So much was looked at. They even looked at all his finances and everything. I mean, It is an incredible lens to look at when you read those transcripts. So that's a cool idea. I like that.
Yep.
All right. So you've answered our next question as well, which was really about where to for the estate in the future, and I agree with you totally. They need to put the emphasis onto releasing quality products about Michael's art. And like you also said earlier in the show, that golden period of the late 70s and very early 80s, there's so much to be done there. I can't believe how many times I put on YouTube to put on a Michael Jackson concert. And the only concert that exists on YouTube in high definition is a fan-uploaded version of the History Tour. And that's just crazy to me because this guy's the greatest entertainer that's ever lived. You can get, Prince concerts and every other artist you can think of in high definition streaming on your TV, but you can't get Michael Jackson from his peak eras, from his, from the estate. And I just think that's crazy. So I agree. I think they need to do a lot more work. But hopefully in the future. But like you, as you always say, let's not hold our breaths for that anytime soon.
Are there any Jackson 5 shows? I know I have personally. I have the first leg of the Destiny tour on videotape, but I think that is on YouTube somewhere as well. I think I also have another show. I think I have that Mexico show on videotape. And then I have a very rough copy of the Victory tour, but nothing on the Triumph at all. So, I would just love to, see that material, especially the Jackson 5, a Jackson 5 show.
Agreed, totally. All right. Now, I want to ask you one last question, Shawn. And this is a question we usually ask our special guests, but I want to know from you as well. When all is said and done, how do you think Michael Jackson should be remembered?
As the greatest entertainer of all time. What he was able to do has been unmatched by any other artist up until this point. To go from peaking in the 70s and then peaking again, in the 80s. And then in that second peak, you were the biggest artist ever. It's rare that an artist will peak twice. Typically an artist will peak and then kind of plateau for the rest of their career. But Michael plateaued and then went to another height. And so you've got to give him credit for what he was able to do. He broke down barriers for so many artists. He did what the others did for him. He did what James Brown, what Sam Cooke did for him, Stevie Wonder. And so he did those same things. And, some people may not want to admit this, but he did that for the Princes and the Whitney Houstons, even his sister Janet, for all of those Madonna, for all of those artists who came in the 80s, they owe a huge debt to Michael. And so he needs to get the credit for that. And I think he will. That will always be his legacy, no matter how much people try to ignore his legacy and ignore the family's legacy. You just can't get beyond the fact that, or get by the fact that what he did broke down barriers that, will continue to, people will continue, or broke down doors that people will continue to walk through for generations to come.
Shawn, brilliant answer. I have had such a great time talking with you today. I'd love it if our listeners, if they've really enjoyed what you've had to say as well, how can they connect with you online?
I am on Twitter. My Twitter handle is SASHACKELFORD or SA Shackelford. That is primarily my social media that I use. I am on Facebook as well, but I'm kind of moving away from Facebook. I think it's time. So I know, Jamon, you're not on. I've heard you talk about it. And I'm getting to that point as well. So I'm pretty much on Twitter, and I love to interact and engage with Twitter. I've actually met some really good MJ fans. Just want to mention, I mentioned Jason Anderson earlier. Bernard Zollicoffer is a great fan and a great follower. And then you guys as well. So Twitter is the place. Absolutely.
And Q, been great catching up with you again.
This has been so fun. Oh my God. So fun. Just like MJ fan chat. It's been a while. So yeah, I've loved it.
A minute.
I've loved it.
Well, thank you guys. Cool. Thank you guys for having me on and just indulging me. And I can talk Jacksons all day. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, that is absolutely our pleasure. It's been great. Now, Q, where can people find you online?
My Twitter is What Was The Q? What Was The Q? And I'm also on Instagram, but it's a slightly different handle because for some unknown reason, they shut down my original Instagram account and I'm not getting it back by the looks of it. So it's very, very frustrating. But my handle on Instagram now is What Was The Q2? So it's like the sequel. What Was The Q2 on Instagram? And you can find me there.
Brilliant. And of course, the MJCast can be found all over the interwebs as well. We are at the MJCast on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube. You can subscribe to us as a podcast, as we're intended to be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Just search the MJCast. We've got news and discussion on the King of Pop and his family. And we also have special interviews with people that knew Michael Jackson and worked with him. And we've got some exciting episodes coming out for the rest of this year. I know that we've spent a lot of time this episode talking all about Michael with his brothers and during the Jacksons era, and that has been amazing, and that's a highlight of his career. We are entering, though, as well into a period which is the anniversary of the Invincible album and the 30th anniversary concerts, which is the period of time that made me become a fan. So for a couple of episodes later on this year, we're going to be talking about Invincible, which should be great as well. So again, Shawn, thank you so much for joining us on the MJCast. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully you'll get to come back on the show at some point in the future as well.
Thank you. And I look forward to it, and you guys keep up the great work.
Yeah, shout out to Jamon and Elise and Charlie for editing. But yeah, you've been doing a great job, folks.
Woo! Awesome. Well, I hope everybody enjoys their week ahead. Enjoy the MJCast as you're commuting to and from work. Congratulations, Shawn, on your promotion. That's really exciting news. Congratulations, Q, on your amazing facial hair. I love the
You
moustache.
dork. Oh, my God.
It's very
a lot more
nice.
greys than there were last year, that's for sure.
All right, everybody. Keep Michaeling.
Michael on.
Shawn.
Take care. Take care, guys.
That's it. That's a wrap. Well done.
Can I do a shout out to one of your listeners or
Sure.
a couple? But just a real quick shout out to listener Serena. I know that she had some surgery this week or, maybe a couple of weeks when this was released after it's edited and put together. But wishing Serena all the best and a good recovery. I hope you feel better soon. And actually, my friend Jesse here in Perth, he had some surgery, a second surgery this week. So actually I just remembered, so shout out to Jesse and hope he gets better soon as well. And also Gareth, if you're tuning in, because of my Instagram disappeared, follow my new Instagram so I can follow you back because I cannot remember your Instagram after the other one got shut down. So Gareth, you know who you are.
Q, bring in the thank yous. Thank you, Q.
Yeah. You know me, grateful.
All right, there we go. That's a wrap.